Testing 1, 2, testing. Testing 1, 2, testing.
Testing, 1, 2, testing.
Rentals. Yeah, no, I really think. Yes. But they're gonna get teachers at the start. You're gonna need. It's the bond. Issues changing so. Whether that's true or not. So that's been part of. Force. That's. Here, oh, wasn't there? No, that was.
For Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. We've got roll call is showing that everyone is present. We've got Bill on WebEx and Commissioner Bob Williams is absent excused. New business, perspectives on growth, housing, retail, and mixed-use development in the village of Germantown. I'm very excited about the conversation tonight. I hope you all are as well. This is a long time coming. There's a lot on the agenda. I'm not going to go over the agenda. You can see that in front of you. I know I'm going to turn over to our village administrator shortly, but I'm very excited about the conversation that we'll have tonight, and hopefully we will all learn what is the best path for us to go down. We're not going to resolve that tonight. There may be a future town hall where we get more community engagement with folks, but I'm very excited about this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to Village Administrator Recklow.
All right, thank you. So I'm just going to very briefly introduce the topic here. We have a series of panel discussions coming up on perspectives on growth, housing, retail, and mixed-use development in Germantown. We're going to cover everything from school enrollment trends to residential demand to commercial market potential and the evolving needs of buyers, developers, and retailers here in our community. What we tried to do today was put together a comprehensive, multi-dimensional look at the opportunities and challenges facing Germantown as we're planning for sustainable growth and mixed, vibrant use development, especially and really focused on the Village Center District. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers here this evening. As we look through the agenda and the list of people who are going to be speaking, some great experts who are going to be sharing their information with us. One of the things I'm going to note is just in the interest of time, as each one of the speakers come up, we could spend several minutes providing their bios, their backgrounds, their qualifications. And in the interest of time and trying to cover as much information as we possibly can, we do have that information in the packet, so we won't be repeating that tonight. But especially for our speakers, we really appreciate you being here, spending the time that you were willing to share your knowledge and expertise with our community this evening. So with that, the Community Development Director is going to give a brief intro to each one of the topics that are listed, and we're starting out this evening with a presentation by Nick Johnson from Rofers on school enrollment projections.
Thank you, Steve. As you indicated, we have Nick Johnson here with us this evening. Nick is a project manager with MD Rofers Consulting. They were retained by the Germantown School District recently to complete an assessment of enrollment, demographic, and housing trends in the Germantown School District for purposes of projecting future housing and student enrollment and the implications of that for Germantown School District going forward, their facilities and operations. Tonight, Nick is going to present findings from their June 2nd, 2025 report. So Nick, if you could come forward, please. I think we got the clicker in front of you there. And you can dive right in.
Great. All right. Oh, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. Let me dive right in. MD Rofers Consulting, we're a municipal, regional, and school district planning firm. We're based in Madison, but we work with clients all over the state of Wisconsin. We've projected enrollment for almost 50 Wisconsin school districts using a method that's based in urban planning concepts. So land use, development patterns, but also demographic change, new housing construction, household turnover, generational shifts. This runs the gamut from small town school districts to suburban school districts like the Germantown School District, as well as large urban school districts. So my outline of the presentation, I'll first go over some trends in the district, look at a brief overview of our projection methodology, get into our projections, compare those projections to the building capacities of the Germantown School District buildings, and then wrap that up with what our projections mean for the Germantown School District. So recent trends. So overall, enrollment modestly decreased in the Germantown School District over the last decade, decreasing by about 45 students, even with the introduction of 4K. Looking at only kindergarten through grade 12, enrollment decreased by about 200 students, or about 5% over the last 10 years. Births are now stabilizing after having a significant decrease in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Births decreased from about 371 births in the year 2000 to just over 300 births in the year 2024, a decrease of 17%. That does help to explain that past 10-year enrollment decrease that we've seen. Since the mid-2010s, though, about the last 8-9 years or so, births have been relatively stable at about 320 to 330 births per year. The community is overall aging. Most of the increase in population that occurred in the Germantown School District from the 2010 census to the 2020 census occurred in the population age 65 and older. The child age population, those aged 0 to 19, decreased by about 600 residents, reflecting that enrollment decrease. The median age increased, and the reproductive age population, which is a population cohort that we specifically zero on, those aged 25 to 44, that did remain stable, supporting that stable births that we saw over the past decade. At the same time, private high school enrollment has been increasing. Combined enrollment at the 8 private schools operating in and near the Germantown School District increased by about 300 students over the last decade, about 25% increase. However, that increase was almost entirely concentrated at the 2 high schools located just north of the Germantown School District boundary, Kettle Moraine and Living Word. The other 6 private high schools had pretty stable enrollment over the last decade. Looking at recent housing trends, housing prices have increased. Per the Wisconsin Realtors Association, as of 2024, Washington County's median home sale price was $375,000. That's more than double the price of a decade ago in 2014 of $182,000. While that's lower than nearby Ozaukee County and Waukesha County, it is still higher than the state overall and might impact who can afford to live in the district. Home prices have increased as housing construction has recently decreased. Residential building in the district has trended downward, particularly over the last few years, with fewer new single-family homes built in the village of Richfield portion of the district, as well as fewer total housing units built in the village of Germantown. It's really important for us in our work to understand how different types of housing generate students for a school district. Typically, and this is true in the Germantown School District, new single-family homes generate the most students for a school district, and new apartments generate the fewest. Each new single-family home in the district generates about 0.6 students. A subdivision that you can think of about 100 new single-family homes, we'd likely see about 60 to 65 students in the Germantown School District coming from those 100 new single-family homes. So that ratio is a lot lower than what the public perception is. This ratio is, however, comparable to similarly sized and similarly positioned suburban Milwaukee School District. A 0.6 ratio is very common. We also look at the impact of sales of existing homes. Single-family homes in our work, we've discovered, tend to produce the most students that they ever will really within their first 10 years of being built. That number then tends to decrease as students age and graduate, and more of that housing is populated by empty nesters. Until about 30 years or so is when we see a turnover occur and students somewhat increase a little bit. That means neighborhoods right now that have homes built in the 1990s, those are turning over to younger families. We anticipate that continuing through 2040, as well as homes that were built in the 2000s turning over throughout the next decade or so. We also look at student generation from other types of housing. So this is what we call multiple family housing. This includes our duplexes, condominiums, townhomes, apartments. Older market rate multiple family housing generates about 0.16 students per unit. Newer multiple family housing generates students at a little bit lower ratios, about 0.11 students per unit. We also see that in most other school districts we work in. Older apartments tend to be larger, tend to have more 3-bedroom units, and tend to be more affordable. Newer apartments tend to be smaller, have fewer bedrooms, and tend to cost a little bit more. A lot of the newer apartment product coming online has dog washing stations, clubhouses, things that aren't, really attractive to families with children. They don't typically have playgrounds. This ratio, especially for the newer multiple family, that 0.11 ratio is based on a smaller sample size of 3 recent developments that have been built here over the last 10 years. We did look outside of the district at some comparable municipalities to find some other data for multiple family housing, from new multiple family housing student generation. We looked at new apartments that were built in Mequon-Thiensville, Cedarburg, Franklin, and the Oak Creek School District, so very similar to the Germantown School District, really focused in mixed-use centers. These developments generate anywhere from 0.04 to 0.08 students per unit. Combined across all of those units in those 4 school districts, there were over 1,000 new units. Combined, they generated about 0.06 students. So a 100-unit apartment building in that type of setting would generate about 6 students. Again, these are mostly studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms units, very typical of what's coming online in the new apartment product. A brief overview of our methodology. I go into significantly more detail of our methodology in our report. It's an entire appendix with several different steps. But we first divided the district into 75 neighborhoods. These essentially act as small puzzle pieces for us to do our unique housing demographic analyses and projections on. These were based on elementary attendance areas, subdivisions, major roads, municipal boundaries where appropriate, as well as municipal plans. We then determined the number of housing units within each of those 75 neighborhoods as of March of 2025 when we began this project. And then in step 3, we were able to geocode the students. That's basically placing every Germantown School District student within each of those 75 neighborhoods. So we know how many elementary, middle, and high school students are within each of those neighborhoods. Step 4, we look at demographic change, housing characteristics, new housing development within each of our 75 neighborhoods through several different factors, looking at municipal plans, looking at recent and pending developments, as well as looking at other plans, and then meeting and discussing future development plans with local planners as well as developers. We then projected housing growth for our 4 projection periods. That's 2027, 2030, 2035, and 2040 within each of our 75 neighborhoods. And then in step 6, using information from step 4 and 5, our demographic and housing information, we calculated our student per housing unit ratios, basically how we anticipate the housing in that neighborhood generating students through 2040. Step 7 is just multiplying our housing units by our student per housing unit ratios. That gives us our resident enrollment projections. And then step 8 is just assigning those resident students based on their elementary school attendance area. Getting into our actual projections, first I'll get into our housing projections, then our student enrollment projections. We project about 2,100 new housing units in the district by 2040, an average of about 138 per year. Greater than what we saw over the past decade of about 85 new housing units per year, but a very similar pace to what was experienced in the district in the 2000s. Our expectations for more housing construction are based on a need for housing here in the Germantown School District, as evidenced by local, regional, and national studies, municipal plans that are generally supportive of housing development, new developments that have been proposed over the past couple of years, projected decreases in interest rates over the next few years. Unlike a lot of the school districts we work in, there's a lot of jobs here in Germantown, so a significant and growing number of employment and jobs here in the village. As well as the school district being rated an exceeds expectation district by the Department of Public Instruction. We project the mix of new housing to be almost about half new single-family homes, half new multiple-family homes, with that multiple-family percentage due to market demand. In the village of Germantown specifically, we project about 1,700 new housing units by 2040, an average of a little more than 100 new housing units per year. Again, more than what we saw in the village over the past decade of about 70 per year, but really similar to the pace that we saw in the 2000s. We project new housing to really be focused in south central parts of the village, just north of County Line Road, as well as along the Mequon Road corridor. There are other municipalities in the Germantown School District. We project almost 400 new housing units, really focused in the village of Jackson portion of the Germantown School District, in the very northern part of your district, as well as in the village of Richfield part of the Germantown School District, with most of those being single-family homes. Looking at our housing unit projections broken down by elementary school attendance area, we project about 40% of all new housing will be in the current MacArthur elementary attendance area, about 30% in the current Amy Bell attendance area. Focusing only on new projected single-family homes, which we know produce students at significantly greater rates than other types of housing, new single-family homes are almost split equally into thirds, with a third at Amy Bell, a third at Rockfield, and a third at MacArthur. Getting into our enrollment projections, by 2040, we project an increase of about 150 Germantown School District resident students, with the majority of that being at the elementary school level. We project increases will be concentrated in neighborhoods with significant single-family housing development, shown there in the dark red portions of the district that you see on the screen. Looking at the elementary schools specifically, we project an increase of about 129 elementary school students with about 70% or 70 student increase at MacArthur, 50 at Amy Bell, 30 at Rockfield, and a decrease of about 26 students projected at County Line Elementary School attendance area. The reason for that being that County Line's attendance area is almost built out. There's very minimal areas for new subdivision development in County Line's current attendance area. Looking at the middle school and high school, we project an increase of about 20 resident grade 6 to 8 students by 2040. We do project a decrease at the middle school over the next few years. There are very large current middle school class sizes right now that as they grow and age out of the middle school over the next few years, they'll just be replaced by smaller elementary class sizes. We do project a slight increase in at the middle school through the 2030s. At the high school level, we project enrollment to remain essentially stable, a decrease of 2 students. Enrollment will remain stable through the next few years, then decrease through the late 2020s and early 2030s before increasing again slightly towards the end of the 2030s. Comparing our projections to the building capacity of Germantown School District buildings, we project 2040 elementary enrollment will be below the combined maximum capacity of the 4 elementary school buildings in the GSD. However, we do project MacArthur will exceed 90% of its maximum capacity by 2030. That 90% maximum capacity is a comfortable capacity, and Rockfield is projected to exceed 90% of maximum capacity by 2040. Looking at the middle school and high school, we project enrollment at the middle school will be about 300 students below its capacity through 2040, and at the high school about 400 students below maximum capacity in 2040. We are able to tweak our model and prepare our projections under a couple broad assumptions. We understand that our projections were prepared during a transitional period in the village, including potentially evolving village housing policies that we did attempt to capture in our projections. We have a couple alternative new housing development assumptions and how they would affect future enrollment. The first one is a no new housing alternative. We do that for every school district we work in, where our model simply looks at demographics, looks at housing change, looks at household turnover and home sales, does not include new housing development, does not include students generated from new housing development. Under that alternative, we would project 2040 enrollment would decrease by about 400 students. The second alternative is a greater housing development. That's with our housing unit projections more closely following what's outlined in the village's comprehensive plan. That projected 2040 enrollment would increase by about 280 students, so a bit higher than the increase of 150 that we project now. Wrapping this up, so the implications of our projections. So we advise that the Germantown School District, and this information was presented to the school board last week. We advise that the district undertake a facility planning effort in the early 2030s when elementary school capacity is projected to become constrained. Several options are available to the school district that could be explored to address the capacity constraints. At the elementary level, these include attendance area shifts, so potentially shifting some areas that are currently assigned to MacArthur or Rockfield to Amy Bell or County Line. Additional flex neighborhoods where students living in a subdivision or an area can attend one of 2 schools. They have their choice of school to attend. Expansion or replacement of 1 or more schools, the construction of the 5th elementary school, or even grade group shifts to the middle school, potentially exploring shifting 5th graders into the middle school to alleviate capacity issues at the elementary school. That's it. Any questions?
Okay, we're going to open up for the Plan Commission, and then any village trustee that would like to ask a question, you'll follow the Plan Commission. So, Jeff, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Could you just briefly discuss what, if any, impact private schools have on reducing your projections for the Germantown School District?
Yeah, our projections, we saw that there was the increase at the private high school level. mostly due to the two high schools just immediately north of the Germantown School District boundary in the village of Jackson. We did slightly decrease our high school projections because of that. I think we decreased it by maybe 30 or so students, 20 or 30 students, so not significant. But the other private schools, especially the K through 8 private schools, enrollment there remained stable. So our projections just kept that constant number of moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Commissioners, any questions? Mr. Warren.
So thank you for that information, very detailed. So the elephant in the room is the village center. So are you familiar with the different options that we're looking at as far as family units, things like that? So no matter which way we go with the village center, is there really any impact to the school district of significance, or is it just a little blip on the radar?
We projected, I think from that village center neighborhood, I think it was maybe 20 students or maybe 15. So not very significant. The single family neighborhoods is where we projected the significant increase in enrollment, particularly I think it's just northeast of MacArthur where there's a significant amount of single family development occurring.
So whatever we do, if anything, for the village center, really isn't an impact to the schools.
Our projections would say no.
Thank you.
Yes, Meg.
Can you go to the slide that compared the nearby areas, the calculation
Sure.
of the apartments?
Might take me a little bit. Hold on. I think we're almost there. Yes, there we go.
Can you talk a little bit about how it's 0.08 students per unit and 0.06 students per unit? More looking at the studios versus 1 and 2 bedroom units versus what we have today.
Yeah, so that second bullet point there of developments generating between 0.04 to 0.08, that was the range from those 4 different school districts. I can't remember which was which. I think Cedarburg was right around that 0.04 there, kind of Fox Run area that's just southwest of their historic downtown. Combining all of those developments together had, I think, just over 1,000 units, and that's where we got that 0.06 ratio. So that's, I think there were just over 1,000 units, and there were, I think, 61 students across the village center developments that exist in all 4 of those school districts.
And I don't know if it's the slide right before this or nearby where the current for Germantown is 0.11. And that's largely because of our housing stock being more 2 to 3 bedroom units.
Specifically, the image shown on the screen, Saxony Village Apartments is certainly the largest multiple family development that's been built over the last 10 years. That ratio is, I think, 0.12 or 0.13. There are more 2 and 3 bedroom units in that development, and it certainly has more of a suburban feel type of development than you would see in like a village center or a mixed use area.
Thank you.
Anyone else, commissioners? Russ?
Can you talk, and maybe you can't, but can you talk about reliability of enrollment rate from multifamily rental versus single family home ownership?
Yeah, so student generation from those 2 types of housing? Yeah. So here in Germantown for that new single family home, it's 0.6. An established single family home, that's what we call single family homes that are greater than 30 years old. They're about 1/3 or 2/3 of that, so generated about 0.25 to 0.45. And that's something we see in most every school district we work in as well, that established single family homes generate fewer students than new single family homes, but still more so than apartments. In the apartment side of it here in the Germantown School District, those older market rates, so older apartments, 10 years older, generate about 0.16, and then the newer product is 0.11.
I guess I was looking more for reliability of enrollment length in the school district. So if the school district looking to plan around a new enrollment it's single family versus a rental situation. How reliable is that enrollment from those?
Yeah, I don't know if we know that specifically or specific for the Germantown School District. We do find that those multiple family ratios are fairly consistent. They do tend to increase a little bit as time goes on, so there are more kids coming from there. I don't know if they are the same kids though, however, if that answers your question.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the amount of students produced, they just might not be the same student.
Correct, yep. And we don't know that from a single family neighborhood either. We don't know if those are necessarily the same 0.6 students that are there now that would be there in 5 years. There are some turnover, you know, families moving, families coming in, but. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Well, I've got a couple comments. I learned a lot tonight and
Great.
very detailed. Not only will this benefit our discussion and our path forward for the Village Center, this will also benefit all the other planned developments that are already in the queue in the village. So I'm really excited about that we're all learning a lot of great information. I didn't know that there was such a large gap between kids per home for single family, for multifamily old units, and then quite surprisingly, for multifamily new units of 0.11. So I'm definitely learning a lot tonight.
Yeah, sure.
And another takeaway that I have that we are an aging community. And because of that, my concern is if we don't do something from a smart development standpoint, we will continue to be an aging community and possible projections may decline rather than increase if we're aging. So, but again, I want to thank you. And I've been reminded that there's snacks on the table over there for everyone to munch on. So help yourself. Village trustees, any questions of our speaker? Okay, commissioners, any other comments?
For capacity,
Yeah.
did you utilize building capacity or kind of more best practice expected use for the building staff? And Mr. Reuter, if you want to weigh in on this, Superintendent Dr. Reuter.
Yeah, so I think the slide where it says 90% capacity, if you could go to that one, Nick, that is part of our facility use study, and those are part of the national operational efficiency rates. So we often think of capacity at 100%, but a school building is based on instructional space. We don't house kids all day in a cafeteria. They're not always in the gym. They're not in the hallways. So a comfortable rate at the elementary level from a capacity standpoint is 90% of the building capacity. Middle school is 85 and high school is 80%. So, and that's based on our class size policy on how we use those ratios through our facility use study, and then MD Roffers utilize that information as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
I did get a chance to listen to the entirety of that presentation back in March.
Yeah.
Could you also share why it's 90, 85, and 80 at the various age levels?
For sure. Oh, would you like to? If I did a good job? No. So you have to think about how a school building operates and moves during the day. Elementary students are most likely self-contained within their classroom because they have one teacher. They go to Phi-Ed, they go to music, and they go to art. Middle school moves through a block schedule, and then high school moves from an hour-to-hour schedule. So there's fluidity at the building. That's why those percentages go from 90% down to 80% and you have bigger kids as you get older. And spaces aren't always created equal, right? So you're in a tech ed classroom that is bigger than this space right here, but then you might be in a history classroom that if I built the wall here is that big. So all those factors took place from the PRA study with square footage, ages, and then using the operational efficiency rates that are industry standard.
I think the only part that you didn't talk about this time, but did last time, was that a class may also not be at capacity at the high school. So you may have space for 20 plus kids and maybe only 15 have signed up for that particular class.
Yeah, our class size policy is a one teacher to 27 students at the high school, but that's not always accurate, right? We might have a class of 30 because we're not going to start another section of 15 and hire another teacher and then hamper the budget. But to your point, there might be a tech ed class that we offer every other year, a welding high-level course and we only have 15 kids or 10 kids signed up for it, but they know they're going to have an opportunity at some point because it's part of a career path. Whereas in elementary, you have reading, you have math, you have writing, science, and social studies every day. So you paid, nice job. What's that? Very nice.
Dr. Reuter, seeing that you're here, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Thank you.
Um,
You're not my boss anymore.
I
so.
know. Touche. The Plan Commission, I believe a couple weeks ago, approved a proposed development called Sutton Farms. It'll go to the village board, I believe, at the next village board meeting for consideration and action. There's other development that I mentioned that are in the pipeline. I feel very good that the potential impact on the school district is relatively low based on the presentation tonight. No one wants to talk about the R word or referenda. We don't want to do that. I know you're doing a facility study. I know you've got that's a different path forward than a typical building referendum due to projected growth. Based on what you know on the findings that were shared tonight and based on discussions that you've had with your board and so forth, any concern relative to potential growth in the village of Germantown, which may or may not impact the Germantown School District?
Yeah, I think as Nick shared tonight, future growth, if it were to happen immediately in the County Line region, we're at capacity. We're reaching that. If I look at my data here, our projected our enrollment based on target capacity, we're sitting at there's space at Amy Bell. So what was approved last week through 2 weeks ago, last week through the Plan Commission. And I know we've talked, Mr. Ewert and I and the full board have talked about this. That is a building currently that has capacity. So that development based on the projections, we feel comfortable given our 90% capacity and our class size policy. County Line, we're at a pinch point of our target capacity is 508 students, and we just had 490 students this past year. So we're talking a handful move in, or if there was any type of development that would lead to County Line enrollment, we'd be exceeding that 90% capacity and be at an all-time high. MacArthur, we're currently target capacity is 528, and this year we had 487. So there's room within MacArthur, but as Nick said, with the Village Center in that area to the north, that could lead to their projections. So what we see on our number side plays very well there. Rockfield Elementary, our target capacity is 365. This last year's enrollment was 332. But again, development in that area could lead to a pinch point. So we see that the elementary is going to be that affected area if there's not communication and strategy around what that would look like, which then would lead us to those implications.
But specific to Village Center, and I have no idea what will occur there, but let's hypothetically, let's say we decide to put multifamily there. Based on your projections tonight, for new multifamily, you're looking at 0.11 kids per unit. That to me, looking at an outsider looking in, that will have relatively low risk. Correct, to MAC.
I would say to Mr. Warren's question earlier, to have low risk to enrollment and projection. Back in March, when I presented to Mr. Kreklow and our previous village board president, I think you were at that meeting too, Mr. Soderberg. One of our concerns is with the high rental that go into MacArthur is a transient population. I shared data that night of rolling enrollment. Right. Though the number may look steady over a 5-year period, we see drastic drops or drastic increases because August is lease month. So then what happens is we are scrambling because we have to add a section. You've been in this situation. We have to add a section of kindergarten, and then it's August and we're trying to find a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher. Well, the hiring season is way over. And then other years we have smaller class size because we're overstaffed. So trying to be cognizant to the taxpayer from our budget standpoint of how we're utilizing resource to follow policy and look at enrollment. So though that has minimal impact, it can have impact when those leases are up and families decide to move or move out of Germantown to another neighboring district because they bought a house there.
Understood. Thank you. Bob Warren.
So I know this is not a school board meeting, but I'd like to ask Russ if he could take off his plan commission hat and put on your school board president hat. And based on what you've seen in this report, is there anything that keeps you up at night?
Is there anything that keeps you up in it? That's a loaded question. No, I think, quite frankly, this report, from what I was thinking and kind of, when we were looking at the conversation early on, a lot of this is what I was hoping the answer was, but we wanted to go to somebody that could get us an answer correctly and provide you with the information needed and us with the information needed. What helps me sleep easy at night is their projection is we should start having these conversations in 2030, and we're having them now. And that is from Dr. Reuter's leadership, the board's willingness to follow and provide input in those scenarios. So that side, I actually sleep better at night. Quite frankly, that's probably the best answer I can give you.
I've been told we have to move on before we do any final comments from the Plan Commission.
It's a long 50 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Nick and Dr. Reuter. Appreciate the information. Let's shift our focus a little bit and focus on the Village Center. We've heard that described in a number of questions this evening. Our next guest speaker is Pete Megenberg with Megenberg Research. He's a commercial real estate appraiser and has been with the research firm, real estate valuation and consulting firm since 1994, located in Elm Grove, Wisconsin. Pete did work for the Village Center project, specifically market research into such things as potential for residential and commercial, retail gap analysis, trends and market conditions. And we'd appreciate any insight into that information, but more specifically, we'd like to just tap into your perspective, Pete, on the housing, retail, and mixed-use development potential in the Village of Germantown, based on your own experiences in other communities in southeastern Wisconsin.
Wonderful. Well, appreciate the opportunity to speak before you all. As indicated, we conducted a market study in June of 2023, so 2 years ago. And the focus was the 15 acres comprising the Village Center. And we looked at what typically would be developed in a suburban setting like Germantown by comparing what has been developed up to that point in surrounding communities with similar socioeconomic demographic patterns to Germantown. We looked at a variety of developments and discerned that the site could support new development. In looking globally at Germantown, the competing submarket, there was in excess of 1,000 units of unmet demand per our study. And again, we're going back 2 years, but I don't think the conclusions from 2 years ago would differ significantly to today. So again, a significant level of unmet demand. In other words, there was room for additional multifamily development in the village of Germantown. Again, focused on the Village Center site, we looked at a development comprising 100, 200, and 300 units. And at those varying levels, now I'm not, when I say 300 units or 200 or 100, this could be a multi-phase development, one that may pattern itself after a combination of mid-rise multifamily along with townhomes and so forth. But all in, we looked at a variety of units, studios, 1s, 2s, and 3s. And to the earlier presentation, you tend to generate fewer children amongst the citizenry coming into a multifamily with the smaller units. The developer, on the opposite hand, is motivated to build smaller units because you tend to earn more money, more rental income with smaller units versus the larger units. So it's a delicate balance, and these are market rate. These aren't tax credit deals or deals, multifamily development envisioned to be supported with any type of credits which would have a set aside for specific income levels. So again, in testing that site, the Village Center site, it was eminently clear there was significant demand that was unmet by the current supply of multifamily in Germantown. So broadening that point, and looking at some of the competing communities or communities that have a similar socioeconomic pattern to Germantown, one thing that's consistent is in looking at the trends of home ownership versus renter occupancy. There seems to be a pretty consistent level of renter occupied units versus owner occupied in communities like Germantown. That is, approximately 80% of the home stock is owner occupied, where 20%, and the numbers vary depending on community, about 20% is rental occupancy. Statewide, it's more like 65% owner occupied and 35% renter occupied. Those numbers are heavily skewed by Milwaukee and Madison and other communities like Germantown and Green Bay, rather, and so forth. But in communities like Germantown, again, there tends to be a split of about 80-20, owner versus renter. But then peeling back that concept of who lives here and why, many communities have found that they've become more exclusionary, as was indicated in the previous presentation. Home occupancy, the shelter cost has increased. In fact, it's doubled in just over 10 years in Germantown. And that phenomenon has been mirrored in other communities. So, if you want to attend to the housing needs of everybody that wants to live here or does live here or works here and wants to live here, you need to address the occupancy cost for that incoming resident body. And so it behooves the community to think openly about introducing additional multifamily. We've done approximately 250 market studies in Wisconsin in the last 30 years. And we've looked at trends that affect communities like Germantown, where the community has an aging housing stock and, more importantly, an aging population. So from a real estate, from a housing perspective, one of the reasons that do you need to take a break, or you okay? Okay. All right. I'm just kind of concerned about you staying the course for this entire scintillating presentation here. You have to be concerned about, are you offering housing stock, again, to the point, for everybody that wants to reside in the community? And, I live in Elm Grove. And as I explained earlier, or mentioned earlier, we've had a similar situation occur with a recent development proposed, which is now underway, and it's soon to be opened in its entirety. The village of Elm Grove had a 30-plus acre parcel that had been owned since the 1850s by the School Sisters of Notre Dame. And it laid fallow for a number of years until recently, when it was converted into 237 apartments and 21 home sites. There was great resistance within the village. There was talk of, the element brought in by those incoming residents. And I will say that the average rent of those units is $4,000. So if you do the math, that's $50,000 of rental payment per year, per apartment. And if your shelter cost is roughly a third of your annual income, that means that each household, each key, earns at least $150,000 a year just to rent there. Now, in Waukesha County, the average household income is roughly $75,000. So it's twice the income for the entire county just to meet the threshold to rent there. So in terms of the element brought in, it's actually people that make more money than the existing residents of the community. So that argument, if you look at the actual math, that argument's diffused very quickly. In terms of turnover, most of the units that are classified as market rate tend to have, and Cindy Schaefer is here, she can talk about this, they tend to have an annual turnover of roughly 20 to 25%. Depending on the unit mix under roof, it could be a little higher, it could be a little lower, but roughly 25 to 30% of your units turn over annually. It's not a bad thing because these units tend to be, the new units tend to have, as was indicated, amenities that aren't offered in the existing stock. So if you're here working for a short period of time, a year, 2 years, and you're looking for more or less a turnkey housing existence, the newer market rate units tend to offer that versus going through the rigors of buying, having everything that you'd like, space and so forth, but then having to go through the rigor of selling within a short period of time. And I cited Elm Grove, but there's numerous other examples surrounding the area. I know some here don't necessarily like to look positively at your neighbor like Menominee Falls, but nonetheless, the junction represents a great repurposing of what had been the Western Industries site. Now, a very nice mix of hospitality, recreation with WAC, the multifamily, the commercial, all integrated into one community. That similar pattern has emerged in areas like the Mayfair Collection in Wauwatosa or the Tosa Village, the town center in Mequon, where Cindy will talk about Spur 16 and across the street, her favorite competing development, Foxtown. And then areas like Oak Creek with Drexel, where the decommissioned Delphi Center was converted to a great mix of multifamily and commercial. So there's surrounding the metro area, numerous examples of a mix of uses that accommodates the need of the community, the citizenry that exists here, as well as those that want to or desire to come in, as well as providing a sensible mix of the residential with other community features that are in demand once the rooftops are there. What I mean by that is nobody wants to make the mistake that Brookfield did by opening the floodgates and creating a 3-mile corridor of retail between Barker Road or Gerke's Corners and Moreland. Right now, if you look at that, there's about a 20% vacancy among all that retail. And many of those developments are being repurposed into alternative uses. Case in point is Brookfield Square, where, and the same is, well, not so much in Mayfair, but Brookfield Square is the embodiment of a overstored submarket. So the North End, Boston Store is going down, and upon that site, there will be non-retail, along with a couple of restaurants, but mainly non-retail developed there. Similarly, the corridor, Executive Road, down, or Executive Drive from Blue Mountain Road down to I-94, many of those buildings are going to be repurposed into a non-commercial use. So our study at the Village Center did not focus on retail. In fact, very little attention was paid to the commercial. Our focus of that study was really residential, in particular multifamily. But I will say that in looking at some of the other developments that I've cited, retail does not lead residential. Residential tends to lead retail. You need people in your community that are in place in order to support the retail and the restaurants. The opposite is a sure way of creating financial stress to the commercial sector. So I think our study was made available, or certainly can be made available. Again, I caution you, it's 2 years old, but again, the concepts embedded within that study are still relevant today. But I can certainly make the study, if it isn't available to you, I can certainly make the study available to you. So I kind of presented our findings at a high level, and cited a couple of examples surrounding Germantown that, might prove beneficial to look at.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Commissioners? Mr. Warren?
I thank you for that information, Mr. Mogenberg. And I guess just to reiterate, it's pretty much what a lot of us have thought, that you say that the residential leads the retail for this development. I mean, you need roofs and you need foot traffic before the retail component of it makes any sense. Is that correct?
Correct.
I mean, that's what we're saying here. So
Correct.
for the village center, if we want it to be a mixed use with retail, commercial and that, the residential has to be there first. And it's probably going to be high density.
If you do the math, it's really expensive to build today. Many of the apartments I cited, and again, you have a developer sitting here who can attest to this fact, just to get into the weeds a little bit, your average market rate multifamily will produce a mix of studios, 1s, 2s, very few 3s. Your average size is going to be just shy of 800 square feet within the confines of a rental unit, 800 square feet. The average cost is somewhere around $350,000. Now that's a mid-rise. You'll have a platform or a podium of parking and some surface parking, but you'll have 3 to 4 stories, elevator served above that parking area. And you'll have nice amenities, maybe not a huge clubhouse, but some areas that allow community gatherings. But again, $350,000 per unit at 800 square feet. Now, your average home in Germantown sells for $375,000, just comparatively speaking. So that's the quality of development we're talking about here. Single family, it's going to cost $200 a square foot. So if your minimum home size is 2,000 feet, that's $400,000. $100,000 for the lot, $100,000 for a driveway and landscaping. That's $600,000 to build new. So not everybody can buy into the new home concept. And so if you want your population to grow, albeit and I get it, you're not generating a lot of kids for the schools, but if you want the population to grow, you have to allow for both single family and multifamily. And yes, high density, meaning somewhere is around 20 to 22 units per developable acre is considered, high density, but that's the norm if you look at the developments that have occurred, it's around 20 to 22%, or 20 to 22 units per acre, excuse me.
Is there a magic conversion where you look at the density that you're going to have, and does that roughly equate to commercial or retail square footage?
This gentleman here just came back from a cruise. So, or no, who is it? He just came back from a cruise. He's going to be speaking. So he goes to Croatia and Greece and to Italy and, all over. And he went to communities where the number of square feet of retail per capita, per person in those communities is roughly 6 to 7 square feet per person. In America, we're at 28 per person. We're overstored. We don't need more retail. You only have retail that's in demand for the population. We don't need more retail. Put retail in place when it's in demand. Don't think that you're going to put up another strip center and that's going to drive new development surrounding it. To the contrary, it's not going to happen. All you're going to do is play musical chairs. You're going to build a new unit, a new development, and you're just going to take whoever can afford to go in there from competing units, and they'll arrive, leaving holes in the existing supply. And that's exactly what's happened in our office sector. Again, back to Blue Mountain Road, we did a study for the city of Brookfield at year-end 24. There's 14 buildings between Blue Mountain Road and I-94 on Executive Drive, 14 buildings. The economic occupancy, meaning space under lease, economic occupancy among 1.5 million feet is 30%. 70% vacant, which is why 4 of those buildings have gone through foreclosure already in 2025. So those that are pushing for commercial, I would temper those thoughts and really think about, you know, as President Lincoln said, you have to earn the money before you spend it. Make sure you get the rooftops in before you go overboard with new commercial development.
Thank you for the info.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Any questions from a village trustee that's in the audience? Jeff?
Yes, thanks, Pete. I appreciate the information you shared about the value and the cost of the high-density multifamily units. And, you know, we've heard some of that before. And when you do the math and you come to the conclusion that one, you know, makes a lot more money than the average resident today in order to afford to live there.
Right.
And that is in provided or helps explain or address the concern about the element that be moving in. I think that was the term that you used. But the next step in the opposition to that is, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but when those units stay vacant, then the developer converts them to subsidized housing in order to fill them up. Is that something that from your experience actually happens? And
No, you're confusing two concepts. And I don't mean to speak, I don't mean to make that a pejorative comment to you. First of all, subsidized housing is another nice way of putting that, so you don't sound prejudiced, is workforce housing. So, you know, Elm Grove's surrounded by Brookfield. And I'll say it, I've gotten into trouble before. I mean, Elm Grove is a body of people that tries so hard to maintain the status quo. It's unnerving. But right across the street in Bishop's Woods, Brookfield decided, well, not everybody is making $500,000. The light turned on and they realized that not everybody is making $500,000 in this world a year. They actually allowed for a 3.7 acre site that had 2 50,000 square foot office buildings to be acquired. And upon that combined site, they permitted 203 workforce housing units. Higher density, they have 52 units per acre on that site, but it is a development, again, 203 units, that is in part supported by what are called LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit, tax credits. And what that permits is the developer to receive basically credits at the front end of a deal. And not to get into, I don't know, you probably don't know much about LIHTC, but to get into what happens is that it's a subsidized component to the capital stack of a development. And a developer receives credits, so they're actually federal credits that are administered through the state. And it reduces the basis or the cost of that development. in exchange, the developer sets aside a portion of the total units for a body of the population. It's to meet a certain area median income, AMI. And depending on the number of credits, that is dependent on the AMI that you intend to meet. But the point is that under roof, that's going to be a community of people that make approximately 60 and 80% of the area median income, along with people that are paying market rate rents. And so back to your point, when units go vacant, I would sit back and say, okay, what is the current occupancy rate among existing units in Germantown and the surrounds? It's somewhere around 97 and 98%. So I don't think there's any chance in the foreseeable future when that rate will go down significantly, such that the developer or investor that owns those units will feel they're under duress to seek out anybody for rent of those units. So I don't think that there's a connection between the two concepts of vacant units and low-income housing tenants.
Thank you. Any further questions from plan commissioners or the village trustee? Jan, come forward.
Wonderful.
Trustee Miller, Trustee Jan Miller is coming forward.
Oh, here.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for coming, and this has been very informative. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I think you said that you actually did some consulting for the Village of Germantown.
Right. We wrote a market study back in 2023 on the Village Center. 15 acres, we cordoned up 15 acres and tested that site for the demand for new multifamily market rate housing.
And what was the result of that study?
The result indicated that there was a net demand in the market at that time of in excess of 1,000 units that were unmet by the current supply.
But would that have filled up that whole 15 acres?
No.
No.
No, you're not going to put 1,000 units on 15 acres.
No, I hope not. And that
I'm saying that the community as a whole had an unmet need of 1,000 units. And it so happened that we focused on the Village Center. So if you do the math, and let's say it's 20 units per acre permitted, you're going to have somewhere around 250 to 300 units on site if that were fully built out.
Okay.
So that's 1/5 of the total.
And did the Village of Germantown hire you?
We were hired by Bailey Copeland and of Gray Wolf.
Okay.
At the time.
And when you do these studies, do you take into account the housing that is around the 15 acres?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And within the entire village?
Well, as you proceed away from a site, the housing stock further away becomes less relevant.
What is the radius then?
It really depends. It really depends. There is no hard and fast rule. One of the features that distinguishes some multifamily, the more successful multifamily, from the lesser successful multifamily is the walkability score, meaning when you leave your door, how close is the commercial sector? How close is the school? Are there walking paths nearby? Is there a green space that I can enjoy? So those walkability factors oftentimes play a part in the decision-making by an incoming resident to a community.
Okay.
So again, if I'm renting at one location and it happens that the reference point you're referring to is 5 miles away, I don't think I'm going to walk over to that location.
No.
So,
But if you had amenities within a mile radius, don't you think that would be an attraction as well?
it could. I mean,
Park,
there's no,
shopping.
there's no hard and fast rule.
Ah.
You look at, as an example, you look at Tosa. Tosa's on fire. You have State Street Station, 250 units that were built at 75th and State. St. Bernard's just went down. And the parking lot between St. Bernard's and State Street is under construction with Harlow and Hem by Mandel. Harlow and Hem and St. Bernard's are going to add over 300 units. Why do people live there? You've got the Village Park right down the street. You've got all the restaurants and bars within walking distance. You don't have that nucleus of activity. You have churches and green space around you. You don't have that nucleus of activity elsewhere. You also have a regional medical center that happens to generate 90,000 jobs on a daily basis.
Well, we do have a park nearby. We have amenities, we have restaurants. I would say within a half mile. And I walked it. We also have, it's not multifamily housing. In addition to multifamily housing, we have actual subdivisions. And the homes are, I would say, on the north side of 500,000. I think the median, actually, maybe Mr. Retzloff can elaborate, but I believe our median price for our homes now is about 450,000. That's what's been reported.
I was just citing the facts that were presented previously.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting is years ago, are you familiar with Ruby Isle and Brookfield Square?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
I still go there.
What's that?
I still go there.
Perfect. So Jake Ruby
Right.
built Ruby Isle.
Right.
And then he owned the apartments right behind it at Norhart Crossing.
Yeah.
Jake was getting out of the real estate business, so he sold the apartments to Mandel. And what came with it was some vacant land to the south of the Norhart Crossing, or Norhart Apartments. The vacant land became Norhart Crossing. So I was asked to speak at a forum similar to this about the element that was going to come in with those apartments. So we had the chance to get redacted information on the last, and there's a really nice subdivision. So relative to your portions, economic portions you've just cited, there's a subdivision just west of the Norhart side. So I got a profile of the 5 last buyers that entered that subdivision. The profile of, who lives there, how many kids, what their annual income is. And then we took the first 5 people that applied for renter status at the proposed Norhart Crossing. So the first 5 redacted all personal information. Their annual income exceeded the people that came in as buyers by $30,000 a year. This goes back 15 years.
Sure.
By $30,000 a year. So you're inviting people that can afford, you're probably inviting people that make more money than the residents in the single family.
Well, I think you have to really take a look at, in all of these studies, to me, it was, you made a couple of great statistics previously. Homes or subdivisions that are up north of 30 years old are attracting young families. And those are going for more money than what the original owners had. So there is a turnover of neighborhoods. There are young couples moving in. And I would say that their, just a guess, income is way north of whatever anybody else there originally had. So I think that we have to count a little bit. It's just my thought. I think we need to count our amenities and also what we have around our our actual, what we want to desire to be in a village center. I think we need to count those people because they will come. They do want to go to restaurants. They do want to go to the park. And we've got a fabulous park. So thank you for the update on the village center that you did. And I would love to have that resource.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's on our
Thank you.
village website. Thank you. Any further comments before we move forward? Yes, Russ.
Just from obviously being a research-based firm, when you mention community need, what do you
Community
need?
okay.
What are you referring to in that? Is it specific to this community? Is it specific to a floundering community, a growing community, this community of Germantown?
Are we referring to new development for new residential development or commercial development? What are we referring to?
In the context of the conversation and the information you're providing us, when you refer to community need, what are you referring to?
Well, if you look at the asset classes, I'll just be deductive in answering the question. If you look at the asset classes really broadly, industrial, office, retail, residential, and in particular to this conversation, multifamily residential. Industrial locates in a location like at your industrial park for a variety of reasons. That park was largely driven because of very cheap land and available resources. Office is largely driven by decision makers that decide to locate in an area. Retail is driven by the retailers. It's not driven by developers. A developer answers to the bequest of the retailer. And a retailer looks at the demographic profile to an area. They see the traffic count along the arteries upon which they want to locate. They look at the spending patterns, which are very accessible. And they see employment. They look at all the government data that's available. SIC codes define the employment composition within an area. You can look at census data to look at the expenditure pattern of residents. That's why retailers come to a location. Walgreens or CVS will not go a block away from the hard corner. They want the corner because you can just go on their website. CVS site locates when the artery they can face has a minimum of 20,000 vehicles per day, period. So they have a formula. Most retailers are not going to come into a location that has an abundance of competing property for obvious reasons, competitive reasons. Residential is driven by the base demand within a community. And that's tied to the variety of amenities that community offers. School system, green space, churches, accessibility to the surrounds. There's no one simple formula as to why somebody locates residential in a community. But clearly, if a community shows that there's demand for the, additional product, and they look at the balance of other features among the other asset classes that exist, it becomes a very attractive opportunity for new development.
Would it be fair to say Germantown is overpressurized by the want of people to move here without the housing market or the unit capacity to support that want?
No, Brookfield years ago, they kind of turned their back on the development community, and the developers have options. You don't have to build in Germantown. I mean, people, if they're desirous of making money on a new development, they can look elsewhere. They can go to Menominee Falls. They can go elsewhere to build. They don't have to build here. But if there's demand and there's a willingness on the part of the village to accept that new development, there could be a nice marriage there. But a developer is profit-minded. So if there's too great a resistance toward new development, people will just look elsewhere.
Yeah, so I'm working in this community need. So you're discussing it from a standpoint of the developer. And we have a question, a duality question on what the current community wants, what the prospective community coming in would like.
Right.
And how do we answer that? And how does this team here answer that?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, again, I go back to Elm Grove because it's been a living frustration for me for 30 years.
Picked up on that. Still a resident though, right?
I'm, but people aren't moving for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
You know, if I sell a house for $1 million, where am I going to go? Now I got to pay retail someplace else, and I'm not going to step down to 500,000. And I don't mean to sound, you know, that's not a boastful comment. I'm not going to step down to half the house, if you will, right? I want to at least do a lateral move. So, people are here for a variety of reasons. The price point at which they can enter the community, the school system, maybe their friends, whatever the mix of needs are that are being answered by them coming here. And it depends on the age. You know, if I'm 65 years old, I'm not going to buy a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home, you know, with 2-inch trees in the front yard and think that's, you know, nirvana. It's not going to answer my needs. And people aren't selling in older communities like the Elm Groves of the world because of that, you know, the fact that they don't have space options available to them. And they probably are there debt free. And so why move? So if somebody comes into a community where all those amenities are already in place, by buying a 30-year-old home, boy, it checks off a lot of boxes on their list of requirements that they really want in coming into a community. Unfortunately, like we all know, the supply isn't there. People aren't moving. And it's not just an interest rate thing, it's a, you know, it's a lifestyle thing too.
Sure.
Okay, we have one final question from Commissioner Warren.
So before you leave here, you talked about developers do not have to come to Germantown.
Right.
And we're looking at this max percentage for multifamily. And I don't know if you've seen other communities trying to apply that. Is that a deterrence for a developer to see a community that puts a maximum percentage of what multifamily should be versus going to a community that doesn't have something like that?
You know, it's interesting. I'll answer it with a living example. In 2010, Brookfield, the city of Brookfield, hired Gruen & Gruen to do a study on the space demands, in particular multifamily space demands in the city of Brookfield. And the consultant concluded that Brookfield, the city of Brookfield, could support no more than 800 additional units. This goes back to 2010. Since that time, over 4,000 have been built. Now, what's happened is this, to answer your question. Residential, proportionally speaking, when I say residential, I mean single family and multifamily, not senior, not, you know, just pure multifamily, market rate multifamily and single family. In a community like Brookfield, historically, they've attempted to achieve a 70-30 split, where 70% of the equalized value is residential and 30% is all other. So that's senior, industrial, office, retail, etc., non-residential. Again, 70% of the value in the community is residential, 30% is non-residential. Right now, it's about 74% residential and 26% non-residential, because the residential has had a proportionally higher increase in its value relative to the commercial. Problem is, if the community continues to survive, pay its bills, and keep its lights on, you have to derive revenue from both pots, the residential and the non-residential. So if you're going to have a rise in your residential and a decline in your commercial, it shifts the burden to the resident taxpayer to the, not the non-resident or using my example, non-resident taxpayer, there's a shift in the burden in maintaining the budget to a community by having a disproportionately high amount of residential development value to commercial. So you have to seek a balance between those two. Because from a community standpoint, and everybody talks about taxes, if you become known as a community that is a very high tax community, Oak Creek had this back in the 80s. They were known as a very high tax community. Hence the reason they opened the floodgates and had multifamily come in. Milwaukee has seen this, and now they've shot their assessments up. But the point is that you have to have a mix between the two in order to maintain balance in your community from a taxation standpoint. And I think that feeds into what developments you permit to enter the community.
But I think the question really is assigning a percentage in Germantown, maximum multifamily. I don't know how that works. And if that is a deterrence to a developer coming here, because he may see that and say, well, they're limiting me. I want to put more multifamily here, but their percentage is limiting me from doing that. Therefore, why should I build in Germantown?
Right. I think if you, instead of sitting back and resting on emotional laurels or emotional thought processes, if you look at get into the weeds and actually look at a study that in a very granular way looks at the actual demand in a marketplace, our study did that. And it deduced that there were in excess of 1,000 net units in demand here that were unmet by the existing supply. And there's ways to determine that. You look at the supply of product in the marketplace, you look at what's in the pipeline, you determine demand per unit type, and you can deduce in a very credible way what demand remains in place with the proposed development. In this case, we were looking at the Village Center, a 100 low density, 200 moderate density, and 300 unit development on that site.
I think that answers my question. It's really not this magic percentage. You have to look at the economies and all the data that you provided to us. I mean, that's the answer as far as how much multifamily. It's not this arbitrary percentage that we may come up with.
No.
So, thank you.
Well, Mr. Welgenberg, we have to move forward, but I want to thank you for your presentation. A lot of learning occurring tonight. You certainly are a subject matter expert. And again, I want to thank you for coming.
Good, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Nice to hear.
Thank you. We're going to shift our focus to residential and housing needs in the village of Germantown and get perspectives from those within. We have three real estate professionals joining us this evening. First, Pat Tasker, a realtor with Shore West. Pat has 35 plus years experience in the residential real estate market and is a 20 plus year resident in the village of Germantown. Kevin Nash, also a professional realtor with Shore West, 27 plus years experience and a lifelong resident in Germantown, I believe.
Not lifelong, but
Pretty close.
depends on who you talk to.
Okay. And Joey Carini, a professional real estate agent with Keller Williams, 23 plus years experience and a Germantown resident. Sorry, I don't know how many years you've been here. But we're going to ask for you to share your information, your observations on our strengths and weaknesses in the village of Germantown housing market. What are buyers looking for? What the demand is for? And whatever observations you're willing to share this evening.
Shoot. Go ahead, ladies first.
Oh, make the light go off. There you go.
Okay,
You're live.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Most of you probably have heard me before on a few occasions when I have made some statements or sent in some emails, but to refresh you, I have been a resident for 20 years, like Mr. Resloff said, and I've not only lived here, but I've worked in the community. I've lived here, supported it. and shown it off proudly to hundreds of buyers over the years. I have positively promoted Germantown and the benefits of living in this community on my social pages. And I've been attending the meetings and taking interest in the need for housing in our community because I see it firsthand on the faces of people who are out there looking for homes. Over the past discussion on the Village Center and the housing development proposals, I've shared in the public comments, sent emails, and offered input based on what I hear from buyers, sellers, neighbors, and local families. And after attending a summit on Wisconsin housing that was put on by the Wisconsin Realtors Association, I did share some of those statistics and data with you and offered the full slide deck, which several of you did ask for, and I appreciated your interest in that, going another level deeper. So today, let's talk about why do buyers want to move to Germantown in the first place? And they come for, these are the main things that I hear people saying. They come for our well-rated schools. They come for the reputation of our safe neighborhoods. They come for a solid variety of single-family homes, existing and new construction, single families, and of condos. They come, and I totally fit this, move from the city. I was close enough to use the city for all that it does offer that I do love, but at night I can return home to a peaceful, safe, nice community that I can live in. Once here, residents begin to see and appreciate even more of what Germantown, what makes us special. Our parks, our events, our parades, our incredible library, our park and rec department, and they want to stay. And staying and welcoming new neighbors, though, means having the right housing options and the amenities that people are looking for. To better understand what people were looking for, I just did an informal poll, which I'm going to give to you the typed up results on the Go G-Town Go Great Facebook page, the Nextdoor app, and directly from buyers who I've sold homes to. And the question was, I love Germantown. What we really need is, or I love Germantown, what we need more of is. And so I have 3 pages of comments from people. What stood out were the repeated requests for more restaurants, especially non-chain patio dining, a town center feel, more places to gather socially and for recreation, more local shops, and more things to do, and more housing. As I read the comments, though, I found myself asking a few questions. So like the restaurants, people want restaurants. They want small, non-chain restaurants. And I had to think, well, do they know about what's on Main Street? Do they know about Sol Agave and Brahma's and Mateo's? They're all excellent, locally owned. But do we already have some of what people want and they don't know it? They don't know it's there? Do they just think we need more of it? I'm not sure. When it came to places to gather, shop, and dine, I wondered about the Village Center plans. Based on the public meeting comments, there's the impression that nobody wants it. But the feedback received tells a different story. Many residents do want a central place to gather, shop, and dine, walkable heart of the village. Perhaps the disconnect lies in the awareness of communications, not in opposition. I believe everyone has heard loud and clear that the residents don't want to pay for it. We want it, but we don't want to pay for it. So this is what we do need, from what I hear from, again, buyers, more attainable houses for first-time buyers. It's very hard to find anything. I believe you have a listing, no basement,
Correct.
3 bedrooms. I don't know if it's a bath or bath and a half, $339,000. That's an incredible number for that house, but that's what the market is right now. So people, if you imagine your first home where your kids want to buy a home, if they can't go over 300, they can't even move here. They can't even get a no basement house in this community. So what they do want is more attainable houses for first-time buyers, thoughtful downsizing options for long-term residents. Many empty nesters, they want 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, a basement, a 2-car garage, the side-by-side styles. They want a variety of housing that still fits the character of Germantown. The difficulty is in making it affordable. In past public comments, I shared data on the Germantown market and how we have two markets, the existing homes and the new construction. New construction starts in the middle 600s. You can't touch anything under that. Existing homes sell like hotcakes, but the new construction does take longer to sell and of course costs much more. While neighbors commenting at meetings always want larger lots, they want greener spaces, those big lots raise the price of construction. We need subdivisions dedicated to buyers who are not quite at the point in their career or their family life to be able to build that big house. But they want to live here, they want to stay here and move up when they are able to. We need subdivisions dedicated to them with that they can't afford to buy that colonial on that big lot. Our schools are have gotten that much weighted Rofers report, and the first indication at the June 16th meeting was that we can. Tonight it was reiterated again. We can facilitate those kids in our schools. But what I have wondered through the whole process was how come Menominee Falls, and I hate always comparing to other communities, but they have built subdivision after subdivision after subdivision, year after year after year. And I don't hear those discussions like, what are we going to do with these kids? Where are they going to go? Our schools, our schools. You don't hear that. So what are they doing to manage their schools or handle their schools that we're not doing? What are they doing differently that we could look at? That they're somehow placing all those kids, or maybe there's not as many kids as the study shows. And then another thing I've wondered is about the impact fees. We know that impact fees are very high. And at a meeting earlier this year, I did try to go back to get the exact time clip in the video. But it was said by our village manager when we were talking about how we're going to pay for the land that we were going to buy at the village center, that we had, and I can't remember the amount of money, but there was a pile of money that was still left over from the building boom of the 2000 impact fees. So if we still have money 25 years later from that building boom, are impact fees too high, or are we not using them for what they're, I don't know. It just made me wonder, like, why are they still sitting there? We need to match the homes for the places for people to enjoy our community, whether it's Friday night fish fry, summer concerts in the park, or shopping at a local boutique. And get us to stay here instead of driving to Mequon, or even better, get the Mequon people or Menominee Falls people to come here because we have such nice amenities. Growth doesn't have to mean losing our identity. It can mean enhancing it. I believe Germantown can evolve with grace, honoring our roots while making space for the next generation. It takes a planning commission and village board with a vision to make the right choices for the future of the village. Thank you again for your time, your dedication, and letting me be part of the conversation. I'm always happy to share what is going on in the housing market, especially when it comes to my hometown. And I appreciate your service and making it a better place to live.
Okay. Hi, everyone. When I got the invitation, I'm the guy that was on in the Mediterranean on the cruise, so I don't have anything but anecdotal information. So, but I'll take you back to when why do people want to be here? Germantown historically was a agricultural community. Forever. We just were never designed like Menominee Falls. It just wasn't set up the way that it was, which is why we have the problems we have. There's some of the problems we have today. We're definitely not a walking community. We just never were set up that way. But people come here over the years. I know that when my wife and I came here back in '97, she asked me one time, and at that time, if she had lost her job or had a job change, where would we go? And I said we found home. And at that time, we were 11,000 people. So I was very fortunate to get into real estate the time that I did because I was behind closed doors, being involved in the community, seeing it change. And we've done a good job. People love the roots of this community. So why do people move here and stay here? If they grew up here, they love how it's become. Deep, deep roots in this community. The flavor of the community. And I think that's the problem that the residents are having going forward. They love the feel of the community. And that's what attracts people here. They love the small town feel, but to be 25 minutes from downtown, that may not solve our problem. The Lake Park, terrific. If we could emulate Lake Park somewhere else, you've got good density, very low crime, and it's a terrific place. It's entry-level Germantown, and we never have problems selling Lake Park at all. A great mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. But people, getting back to the community, people want to be here. I don't think I can ever remember in 27 years somebody saying, yeah, I hate Germantown because of this. Ever. They're moving up or moving out. And people do want to stay here. That's the problem. They love it so much they want to stay here. So what do we need? It's interesting, all the numbers. I just ran some stats today. It is quite expensive. $517,000 is the average sale price in Germantown today for 2025, which is up from $292 10 years ago. So we've effectively almost doubled in price. New construction is at $680,000. That's crazy. And it's taking, it's actually at 46% more expensive to build a house than to find an existing home. So getting back to the other gentleman, this is why people aren't moving. I'm not moving. I'm a baby boomer. 74% of us want to age in place because we don't want to do a lateral move into a condo that's going to cost just as much. But if we were going to do some development, we do need the entry level. We do need stuff that's going to be, I know Jackson tried a wild experiment, which I don't know really how it went. Things sold really quickly. But how can we do that? I'm not sure, but the need is there. Stuff that's on the market under 500,000 sells in 5 days. I mean, you can write your own ticket. Over 500, it's a little bit different story. Can be a good value. Some of the other existing subdivisions, Treetops, Sunbury Woods, you're going to have the high 6s and low 7s. Those are selling, but it does take a while. I don't know that I have any answers. People love living here. The park and rec is terrific. They've really evolved in the last 25 years. The police department is top notch. Fire department got full-time people. School system's holding its own. I don't know how we bridge the affordability gap. The one thing that that people are saying is that they just don't want these bigger developments. It was very eye-opening to listen to the stats about the school districts, and even if we have a bigger development with apartments, it's not going to necessarily net a gazillion kids and overwhelm the school system. At least that's what they're saying. But people definitely don't want a Menominee Falls by Costco. They don't want that plunked in the middle of Germantown. And the people that I talk to, again, very anecdotally, but I get around and I'm talking to people at chamber stuff and this, that, the other, and everybody's saying, well, we don't want that. We like Germantown. And I don't know what it does to the balance, right? You got to have business and you got to have their tax base to pay for all this. But people just don't seem to want that. Bring in more Redwood side-by-side condominiums. That really seems to fit a lot of bills, right? I mean, you can have a huge demographic. You can have the 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, which could meet the baby boomers, could meet the seniors, could also meet the first timers, and it's relatively affordable. Today, the side-by-sides in Redwood are under 500, and that's a nice development. If you've ever been out there, it's really turned out to be a nice development. So those side-by-sides is a terrific alternative. Again, Lake Park or something like Lake Park. It's always been one of my favorite entry-level places in the village. So if we could do something like that, it's not a 3-story high-rise. At least that's what people are telling me. Again, very anecdotal from the people that I've talked to. So I guess that's kind of my opinion. So we'll pass it to Joey.
Again, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. I come from kind of a maybe a newer resident of 4 going on 5 years coming into the neighborhood, and I'm going to play into our lineage of my wife and I's aspirations to play into our real estate interests dating back to when we met 14 years ago. I really think she should have been a real estate developer or an architect or something in design, because she's been drawing on graph paper since she was 10 years old. So the point is, our first conversation ever was to talk real estate before there were dates and things like that. Fast forward, we bought in Wauwatosa back when the housing market was recovering back in 2013. I've owned property as a manager, management side, broker side since 2002. So I was there for, the 6% interest rates going up to the bubble. And then there were kind of artificial loan programs that were happening going into like 07, 08, and then we had our issues. Coming out of those issues, people were afraid to own in general. And then when we finally started to recover, we were getting into ownership in general, but I don't think people really knew enough about Menomonee Falls. And this is my age group at that time. At that time, I was like between the ages of 25 and 35 at the time. And so I didn't really have education about Menomonee Falls, Germantown, where Cedarburg was going, other communities in Ozaukee County and our surrounding areas. My point, in 2018, we saw Wauwatosa start to recover aggressively. We were on the west side. I started buying properties there to manage and own as a landlord and dive into that community, but I didn't have the same community that is here. She turned me on to the idea of the Slinger and Jackson and Germantown developments. And I honestly, this is 7 years ago. I'm going to be honest with you. I had no idea what this community was. I have peers in the school districts and the sports programs that we manage that have all moved up here within the last decade, and they didn't know. So now we're coming in here with kids at County Line and MacArthur, kids between the age of 3 and, whatever the ages are for the appropriate schools. And so we're the next generation of people that are diving into the community as, people with kids, business owners, people that are going to spend $600, maybe build something on a plot of land. So Kevin made a great point. I mean, both of these guys have made great points. If we're looking for what someone wants, it is the school districts. It is the peaceful nature of what we have going on. It is the churches. It's the whole community aspect of it. Now, here's something back to your anecdotal aspect. If you go back to the beginning of the year, I've worked in all these communities surrounding us, and Menomonee Falls, for example, if you price a house that's, say, a ranch, stats are 12 to 1,500 square feet, 3 decent-sized bedrooms, maybe a bath and a half, definitely a full bathroom. You price that house and you put it on the market between $320,000 and $340,000, and you have it go live on a Wednesday evening or a Thursday morning, and you have, say, an open house, maybe Thursday evening, and it can be 0 degrees or 50 degrees or whatever, there's going to be close to 150 people coming through the door in maybe 4 days. And that is a byproduct of the fact that the price point was low. You will get a range between like maybe 75 on the low end over 4 to 5 days. And then you're going to get 10 to 20 offers. So 320 to 340 is almost, it's not realistic. It almost seems like price skewing, but I don't think that's the situation. But there were, 21 offers. This is a house I dealt with. This is just one example. It's been happening and it's going to keep happening at least through Labor Day. Every year we have this market. And this is just with interest rates right now at a low range of 6.1 up to 7 and change, depending on the buyer's profile. So, I mean, judging by those presentations that we saw, if they're projecting interest rates to go down, and I think like nationally, they're trying to get to 5.5 to 5.75 that you guys have been hearing. So if we hit anything underneath 6%, then that 1,000 unit demand could probably go up. So how it gets managed, I do like the townhouse idea. Going back to the work in Cedarburg, there was a community off of Highway 60 near 5 Corners. Don't know the units, but the affordability was there. we were in the 450 to 500 range. And those were townhouses that were nice. They were, you get your own real basement, 9-10 foot ceiling. So, I mean, I think it's doable. I'm not, talking logistics, but I've seen it succeed recently. But the biggest stigmatism, back to some of my notes here. So I have rentals at Lake Park West. I have a couple of rentals over there. A family of one child and a remarried couple. And I've known these guys 20 years. And I said, as your landlord and as your friend, I said, you guys are 40 years old and you have a daughter at Germantown High School. Not to take away from the fact that you're going to rent from us, but why are you paying me to rent when you could own this place? And so there's a stigmatism amongst people that are 30 to 45 years old thinking that I can't live here. I can't afford it. They just immediately reflex and say, I can't push it off, or I can't afford it, so I'm going to push it off. Pat made a good point about certain, Kevin did too, about certain price points also. The price points going around 350 to 400, anything under 500, I have listings here, one is yours, that sold in an average of 2 to 7 days. The new construction, it's a great idea. The idea is wonderful. I think we were talking a couple weeks ago about the Stepping Stone development, but he brought in a price tier between $7 and $1 million on a small number of houses. I think that was the number. It was an upper range price point. Like, I don't know what that's going to do in the immediate need for something that's going to satisfy that 1,000 unit, in need quota that's out there. I just don't see it happening because new construction's great, but the prices are up. We bought a 2-acre parcel over on Downers Bay Road, and we have the rigmarole of going through the costs and everything like that, of what it's going to take. So I think people really just need to be educated on what they can and cannot do, and it has to be outside of our region too. Community education, finding out like what we can do and how we can do it at what price points. So I can keep going. I'm just going to stop for now.
Something I'd like to add. The interesting, the presentations that the information that was given to us was amazing, great stuff. But the one thing I will say, we are the gateway to Washington County. People have always, in my 27 years living here, I have sold a lot of houses, hundreds of houses I've sold. I've sold homes twice, 3 times, the same house. People want to be here. Do not be bullied by a developer who's going to tell you, economy of scale, it's the only way I'll do it or I'll walk. Let them walk. We need affordable. Let them walk. Somebody else will come up. They will. They always have, haven't they? I mean, that's just my opinion as a resident, as from what people tell me, as a community advocate, as a realtor, and somebody that loves the community. There will be somebody else that will come up and fit that bill. There always has been. So, yeah, $1 million houses, yeah, I don't think so. On that note, it's interesting because the average day on the market is about 5 days. Now, I'd have to get very forensic to be very specific, so don't take me to court. For the new construction, all right, as Joy was referencing, is between 90 and 180 days. That's for the new construction, okay? But there's a demand, and I would imagine as the market starts to acquiesce to this new pricing and after the inflationary period of this last 4 or 5 years, people may get used to it. But right now, what we have seen as well is some of the resales already. People aren't so happy when they got to resell those $600,000 and $700,000, $800,000 houses after they've had to put in $100,000. The landscaping is real. $100,000 for landscaping, that's real. All right, you don't necessarily make that up unless you got a whole bunch of time. So I don't know how we do the affordability. I do like the condominium townhouse style with a basement. Lake Park, we've got a property in Lake Park as well. My daughter rents it, thank the Lord, because it's a great little place. So that's my 2 cents. Don't be bullied.
I would just add, I'll add about the Norhart Crossing that was spoken about. I actually sold a unit in there this weekend. And it is very lovely. I took some pictures. I'll probably post those on my page this week. It is, people think about multifamily housing, it's ugly. This is really nice. I pointed out to the buyer, it's not just the window, it has a pediment on it. It has decorative pieces on the front of the building. So it's not just a square with boxes, with holes, with windows. It was really nicely done, and the inside is just as nice. That was a 1,700 square foot townhouse with a garage, no basement, for $440. Okay, so there are some really nice ones. The one in Elm Grove is really beautiful. I think that we can find something that would work to keep everyone happy. That would keep the need, serve the need of the consumer, yet serve our residents and keeping them happy and having something nice to look at.
Well, Pat, Joey, and Kevin, great presentation. We're going to open up for some Q&A right now. Speaking of affordable housing, I'm embarrassed to say what I first paid for my home years ago, $99,000. And I thought that was a lot of money back then. I know. And the reason why, and thank you for sharing the reasons why folks want to move here. Mine was a corporate move from Detroit going on 20 years ago. And it was because of softball and hockey. And we had good programs here. And we've been here for 20 years and we're not leaving. It's a great community. So, commissioners, questions? Russ?
Just based off of kind of some of the information you provided and talking new construction, do you have any thoughts to lend regarding that county line land project that this commission worked on, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? I forget what, 2 weeks ago. Was it 200 and X amount of units, some row home based, some
273.
larger, some larger family, some smaller family, but smaller land size per unit.
Well, you got to do smaller land size because of the cost of the land itself. But I looked at that, there was a couple, this is several months back, there was a couple of developments, couple of potential developments that came before the Plan Commission. It was actually, people do watch YouTube online. So that's interesting. So I was watching it online and there was one, a 60 acre that he wanted 630 units, which was ridiculous. And then there was this one, he wanted 278 on 88 acres, I believe it was. I personally thought it was well thought out. You had green space. It seemed like an appropriate amount. You had a good mix of multifamily and single family. To me, in that location, and you have to keep in mind, you've got 4 lanes county line, and you've got 4 lanes on Lannon, both with direct access. And you hear people complain, oh my gosh, the traffic. What do you want? What am I going to say? You know, you got 4 lanes going in to the 41, 45 on that side. You got going on land and going up north. That to me was appropriate. The amount of units, the infrastructure is already there. You got a big piece of land. You got green space. That, I think, approving that was a home run, in my opinion. I think some people might hate me for that, but from a purely real estate perspective and from what's being trying to be accomplished, I thought it was a good thing.
I think I can echo that from a school district standpoint, because it's a building we had room in for elementary. We have room in our middle and our high school. And to your point, the ease of access there, kind of quite frankly, what probably that end of county line needs. If we're talking, we hear all this information about needing houses, needing rows and density to help revitalize commercial. I can't think of a deader portion of commercial in this town than that end of county line.
And it helps preserve the character of the community because it's not a gazillion in a small. There's going to be green space.
Correct.
There's going to be trees.
It's more than what we're used to, but it's not, to your point,
Yep.
overburdensome.
If you look back on your emails, I did send in I was across the state for a baseball game that night. But that development, I know, had a lot of opposition. But when you look at, if you don't want to build in the village, then you look to farm fields. So you find a farm field and there's still opposition to it. Every buyer I ever anything to. And if there's a farm field, it's like you have no guarantee of what that will be in the future, that there's a good chance that that could be developed. And I like the development and I think it was a good choice.
And then I can maybe answer a little bit of your question regarding Menominee Falls. So that's more of a historical question. They're a school district that used to be 2 high schools. They went through a downturn. They converted that to a middle school. They converted the middle school into an elementary school, so they have larger sized buildings already to service. They're willing to extend class size per teacher, so pupil per teacher in room. And they've also been overpressurized by open enrollment. So combating that, they've done student swaps, meaning decreasing open enrollment as these new developments come in, and they've actually balanced that out nicely. So that's probably why you hear a little less from them.
Thank you.
Bridget, I think you had a question.
No, it's more of a comment. So I moved here 11 years ago. Germantown was not on our top 10 list. We didn't know anything about the community. Our realtor suggested it. He said, well, why don't we look at a bunch of houses, on your list, but then let's go to Germantown.
Been to Oktoberfest?
I still have not, actually. Ouch. But the reality is, once we toured the houses here and went through the community, and it was winter, so none of the trees had any leaves on it. We drove through treetops to get to our now house, and it's like, wow, this is beautiful. This is exactly what I'm looking at, what we were looking for. I mean, he had listened to everything that we had asked for and said, what about this house? So thanks to our realtor, we moved here. And once we moved here, then we told our friends about it, and now we've got several friends in the community too. So you are our first line of bringing folks to our community who otherwise maybe wouldn't have it on the list. So I lived in Tosa, I lived in Pewaukee. We weren't going to move any closer to the east, really looking at the Brookfield Elm Grove area, and the Germantown parcel was exactly what we were looking for. So once our realtor brought us out here and we looked at the house, then I went to Bob, because I worked with him at the time, and said, what kind of community is this? So the advocates for our community are already here, but we don't toot our horn quite enough for people to understand how great it is to live here. And when we do, there's not really a lot available for people to move to. The housing stock goes very quickly. So keep doing a great job, I guess, is my long story here.
You bring up treetops where I happen to live, and Bob is one of my neighbors. I think it's a good example of the opinion at many public hearings is that I don't want that there because it's going to bring down my value. If you look at treetops, we are next to a Belinsky subdivision, next to a landfill, across from an industrial park, next to Windsong, which is, like 25, 30 years old, next to a 1950s mix and match subdivision, yet I have not seen our values be heard by any of those developments. So the thought of, oh, you're going to bring down the value, I think if treetops hasn't gone down in value because of all those things, I don't know what would.
Okay, we got a couple more questions and we are way behind schedule, I've been told. So I apologize, but Josh?
I was just going to ask, do you think that on the village center in particular, that single family homes would be viable there?
I think that would be perfect for multifamily. I hate to say it, for what you're trying to accomplish. And I prefer single family. That's my flavor. But I would say what you're trying to accomplish, from what I can see, multifamily, not like crazy, side by sides, I think side by sides would be all right.
Mhm. I think if you look at some of the Mac One development, they have some really nice properties in there. And one of the plans that we have seen as it went to the south gradually changed from the bigger buildings to the side by sides to the single families. I think that's a really nice transition to not hurt the people on Lyle Lane and to have just a nice transition.
Then as far as like the price points on the new construction, obviously they're insane, but up in Jackson, I think Kevin mentioned it, I don't even know the road. I think it's like Tiger Lily Drive off, P and Sherman maybe, but those houses, I think, are around 1,200 square feet. They're very, close together, very small lots. Those are still in the high 4s to mid 5s. So when I look at what's that magic number that you build for that you say sells in 5 days, under 500 grand, I think that would look, and there's plenty of people that want them, they're all full. But I think that would look so abnormal here compared to what we're used to seeing. But is that a product that you guys see that, have you sold anything in there? Is that type
I
of stuff?
haven't, they've gone too quick. That's not my.
I did sell one of the, in that special project in Jackson. That was 15 or 1,600 square feet for 315,000. But the only way that happened was because of that land, the financials of that land, I believe. Without that, I don't know how they could have ever, and I wondered the entire time how anyone was making any money at all.
Yeah.
Because it just was so paper thin on all the margins.
If you have a chance to go through Renwood, I was very skeptical on Renwood. Because when a new subdivision goes up, there's no trees, it's yucky, my wife always complaining, it looks like a prison. But now that it's been done, and I've had an opportunity to see a lot of the units in Renwood, the side-by-sides, they're nice on the inside, and they're sub 500s. And again, they meet a lot of different demographic, and they've got full basements, 2-car garage. If somebody wants to fill out the basement on a budget, they would, but they're nice and they're
Yeah.
sub 5.
The only thing I don't love about that is they are a little too close. So every window you look out, you see other units. You don't see
Yeah.
much besides other units.
They are, actually the people that we purchased our house from, I moved them over there back in 21. And now they've got like those four unit ones. I mean, that's another idea too. Like the Cedarburg thing that I mentioned with the full basements and so on and so forth, like those are 4 unit enclosures inside the one building, all under $500,000, almost all selling.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So I
There's
mean,
3 on the market right now.
so as far as the town center is concerned, I know there's like, we're trying to find the optimal scenario. The side-by-side thing, if there is, and I'm don't know where personally I'm at with it, but like if there is multifamilies, rentals, whatever you want to title it, it's the theme that keeps coming back to me is the fact that if that's going to happen, you've got to have someone either owning on site, managing on site. I think if there's a problem with a short-term housing or a rental scenario or a multi-unit thing where the numbers are higher than what the community wants, it starts with ownership and management. I showed a condo complex minutes before I got here in Tosa, 122 units built in the 70s. It's not gorgeous on the outside. It needs to be painted. It needs better landscaping and so on and so forth. But there's no rental and it's all ownership and everyone flies the flag there. I talked with people in the common areas, at the pools. I mean, it's not a pretty building, but ownership is key. I don't know how that gets done or how it gets rationed, but if that town center needs to fulfill certain numbers, the notion of an on-site property manager, an on-site owner, an incentive-based thing, these are just
Like in
ideas off the head.
in Lake Park where you said you own some, and Kevin, how much of that is there numbers on what's owner occupied there versus what's?
I don't know the percentage. I know that if you have a rental there, you have to put down a security deposit, and it's substantial, and you're held accountable. As the owner of a rental there, you are accountable if your tenant doesn't move their car, doesn't take out their trash, doesn't keep up their yard. You get notices and you get fined.
Yeah.
Which of course you can pass along. This is like the one thing I want to say, and I'm sorry to throw this as a kind of like a squirrel thing. The thing that came up, it says exclusionary, that we're 80-20. And I just came to my mind, Germantown has never been exclusionary. Germantown actually is a quite diverse community. If you really stop and take a look from 30 years that we've been here, it's a very diverse community, okay?
It's 80-20 simply because we love our community. That's what it is. We love the community. That's why. But getting back to Lake Park, sorry, squirrel. You do have to take accountability as a landlord. And there is accountability that you'll get fined. And if you don't pay your dues, they have a monthly newsletter that your name will get thrown out there in the shame letter. I don't know if you guys seen that?
Okay, two more questions from the commissioners, Bob and then Russ.
So my name is Bob. I'm a recovering Germantown home purchaser. Just thought I'd share a quick story. We moved here in 1990, and at the time, there was no internet, so my wife read an ad in the paper, and she said, there's a home that I think would work for us. And I said, well, I've heard of Germantown, but how do I get there? And I was working on Good Hope in 45. So long story short, we have a 1,800 square foot house that butts up against Altbauer Park. We purchased it for $135,000 back then. Whew. And one thing led to another. You get on committees and all of a sudden you're on the village board. All of a sudden you're on the plan commission. Thank you. And, but for the same reasons, you know, once we got here, it was the same things that others have echoed, you know, the school system, police and fire, public safety, all of that just makes it just a wonderful community that makes us want to give back to this community. I think the reason we're doing this here, though, is I don't want Germantown to be a sleepy community, a sleepy suburb. You know, I think there's things we can do to build off of all of these good things that we've all talked about here. And it's up to all of us to find out what that balance is. But I think we've got a good base moving forward, and I think we can make it better.
Russ?
$300,000 price point with the land that you're referring to, the county's next gen housing project? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Any village trustees like to have any questions? Okay, panel, wonderful job. You certainly know your stuff, and thank you so much for coming tonight. Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. Our next perspective will be that of a couple of folks that are closely involved in the development community. Our first speaker, Matt Maroney, the CEO with Vanguard Partners since 2019. Vanguard Partners is a Milwaukee-based full-service commercial real estate firm since 1992. They specialize in multifamily, industrial, office, and mixed-use and retail developments across Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota. Now, prior to Vanguard Partners experience, Matt Maroney served in senior positions in the Wisconsin state government, including the Deputy Secretary of the DNR and also the Deputy Chief Staff for Governor Scott Walker. So we're grateful for having Matt here this evening to share his perspective on keys to successful mixed-use development projects that he's been involved in. And also our other developer, Cindy Schaefer, founder and owner of Schaefer Development LLC, a real estate development firm in Ozaukee County, one of Milwaukee Business Journal's Women of Influence. Cindy has been involved in the Mequon Town Center, the 1505 apartments in Grafton, and Spur 16, projects that we regularly refer to when we talk about development in the village of Germantown. So with that, ask Matt, you can jump in. We've got some slides, I think.
Sure, and I'm kind of deviate a little bit from what, because I was told to come and talk about public-private partnerships, and I think a lot of that has somewhat been covered. Like, how do I put this? Create a true partnership, right? Identify what your goals are from a community standpoint, and clearly articulate those goals. And I think a lot of the development community, especially the quality developers, will respond to that. And there's a lot of different criteria. All right. What do you envision for that area? There's a good point made by the previous panel. Do you want on-site property management by the same development company, right? Because some companies do that, some companies don't do that, right? As you go forward, what's their reputation in other communities? To take a look and pick those sorts of things out. And we as developers, I really describe us, and you'll see it in, I won't go through the whole slide deck here, but we have experience. We've done this in Oconomowoc, done a large redevelopment, made it a mixed use. development with retail elements, apartment elements to it, which has spurred additional economic development in the area as well. In that community, their goal was they wanted to reinvigorate a deteriorating area and create more vibrant restaurants and places for their citizens to go as they go forward. And they also wanted to provide people places to live. And I've got some interesting statistics from that project that I'll hit. But in the end, we're facilitators as developers, right? We're trying to pull all this market data, permitting timelines, investors, and try to pull them all together in a dynamic marketplace that is always changing on us and always being adapted to that. And a good public-private partnership recognizes that on the public entity side that, hey, we may have a set game plan as we go in, but if market conditions change, we pivot to try to maximize the opportunities. And in the end, I think a public-private partnership really, if you take a look at it, we're sharing the same goals. We're trying to maximize the value to the community because that brings value to our project as well if we're good in the community and integrate really, really well. And we're trying to minimize risk. We're trying to minimize our risk, and we're trying to minimize the risk in the community. So I have a great pleasure. I work at a company where we do our own on-site property management. We have 2 properties ranked in the top 5 in Wisconsin for tenant satisfaction, in the top 1% in the nation. And we really go that extra mile as we go forward. And you've heard some interesting statistics tonight, and I want to say they're true. And across our units, the number of school children right now that we have is 0.03 per unit, right? So it's slightly below the bottom range of what was talked about earlier as far as our median income is $93,000. $93,000, right? And it continues to go up as we go forward. The median age, the fastest segment is 55 plus coming into our apartments. So those are people that want to downsize, still be part of the community as they go forward. Where our residents work, 3 of the top 5 places across our portfolio are hospital systems. That's where they're coming from. That's where they're working at as we go forward. 18% of their income is going towards rent. So that's below the 30% threshold that you often hear about you spend on housing, about 18%. And people, especially the elderly or the 55 plus, they don't want to, pay, to maintain their homes, but they want to still be part of the community, and they want the flexibility to travel is what we're seeing, at our communities. And then most of our residents come directly from that community or very close by. We're not seeing a lot of people move great distances into our complexes. We want to be integrated to our community. We want walking trails. We want bicycle trails. We want to connect to the business community because that creates win-wins as we move forward, as we go forward. Apartment renters are looking for the same thing that single-family home renters. There's really no difference. When we ask our residents what they're looking for, schools ranks lower on the list, but great amenities for pets ranks way high, right? It's kind of an interesting dynamic. We have 0.5 pets per apartment units, right? And a lot of those are dogs, right? And we take the extra special care we have so much pride in our communities. We have a program called Poo Prints, where we take the DNA of the dog, and if there's excrement out there, our maintenance techs will take a sample, and if we figure out who it is, they're fined, right? But that's the steps you go to make sure you have high quality living for our residents. That's how we rank high in satisfactions. And I know those guys do the same thing, right? So it's all, what are you looking for? How do you create win-wins? And it doesn't have to be an us versus them thing, right? Oftentimes that's what multifamily development is portrayed. It's us versus them. It's really not. It's a community. And most of those residents are coming from the community, but want a different lifestyle choices that move forward. So I just want to hit on those kind of highlights. I can talk more about public-private partnerships. That's something we really pride ourselves on. But in the end, it's about open communication, identifying goals, working together to achieve those goals as we move forward. And I think there's a lot of great people in the development industry that would work on that. But in the end, we got to make the project work from a profitability standpoint. Otherwise, there's no investors. It doesn't happen, right? It's just a business, just like any other business as we go forward. So I wanted to be kind of quick, high level. I get in much more details. I'll turn it over to Carol. Or Cindy, sorry.
No worries. Did I have a slide? I think she had a slide for me.
Probably goes.
Oh. Well, thank you, Matt. I agree with everything you said, and I agree with a lot of what was said this evening. I guess I have a question for everybody here tonight. How many people, raise your hand, if at some point in your lifetime you lived in an apartment? So most of the room. So tonight, what I really wanted to talk about, we talk a lot about the numbers. It has to be collaborative. It has to work for both the developer and the community. So we often get portrayed as, profit, money hungry, but it's a business. But you have a business too. Your city is a business. Your city has to be economically viable. So it has to be something that works well for you as well as us. The project I did in Mequon was on 14 acres. It was what's called an infill site, which is very similar to the site that you are debating tonight or have been talking about, which is kind of a unique site. It's usually a smaller site. It usually has certain issues with it. And so an infill site is a unique site, and they tend to be mixed use, where they have commercial and residential in them. So that particular site, the city bought the land for, I think it was around $1 million. Bridget was with the city at the time as a planner, or not the planner, the engineer. They bought the site for $1. Or for $1 million. They sold it to me for $1. But we redeveloped the site and generated over $500,000 a year in tax revenue. So it paid back the money for the site, and it continues in perpetuity to generate $500,000 for the city. So those are the numbers. But what I really wanted to talk about was the softer sided development. Is there one more? How do I, another?
Right there. Is that it?
There we go.
Oh.
So this is what I wanted to talk about. Why do I have a woman in a wedding dress in my picture of my development? That is my property manager who just recently got married. She's been with me for 3 years. She managed the property. She actually lives in Washington County, but she loves the property so much that she wanted to have her wedding reception at our site. How many people want to have their wedding reception where they work? Well, Brittany did. Not only did she want to have her wedding reception there, she invited our residents to the wedding reception. And those are 3 of our residents with her. These are all people that, and this is just a smattering, fair housing, we rent to all ages. But these are a few residents. One of them is Bunny Rush, who was a newscaster, right? She came in and she said, Cindy, I just want month to month. I'm never going to stay here. She's been with us for 5 years. Another resident sold a home and moved here to be closer to her grandchildren. So what we think is important, what I think is important, is that you're building a community. And you care very deeply about your community of Germantown. That's very evident in what was said here tonight. And that's the most important thing, is that you're building community. What we're doing, what the problem here is, no one can afford to live in Germantown. It's a great community, but no one can afford a home in Germantown. So what happens is when you build a multifamily complex, a high-level multifamily complex, is people that live in the community are going to sell their homes and move into an apartment. I recently rented for 6 months, and I came home and I had to change my furnace filters and unplug my gutters and mow my lawn. People are moving into these apartment complexes. They're able to travel. They're able to visit people. They can go down south. They can stay here. They can bring their kids to the pool. So it's a whole different lifestyle. It's almost like a de facto senior housing in a way. But in addition, we're getting young couples that can't afford a home that want to get into the community and get started. And it's a chance for them to get into your community and learn about your community. So I feel very strongly about multi-generational housing. You have seniors, you have young couples, and they all come together and it forms a community. In our project, we had a public market. And we repurposed an old public works building and turned it into a public market. We don't make a lot of money on that public market, but what we do is create a sense of community with our public market. We had over 125 classes. We had weddings. We had events. We have 10 restaurants. The restaurants are economically viable because there's a small space. They're not renting a whole huge restaurant and all the seating. They have shared seating, so they're much more economically viable. And in addition, what it really is is it's a senior center. It's a community center. It's a place for people to come and gather. You can come with your parents and your kids and your grandkids, and somebody can get pizza and somebody can get sushi. So that's what you have an opportunity, I think, in Germantown. You have a very unique site. Your team here has the foresight to say, hey, we've got something special here, something we could do. And this is something could be a game changer in a positive way for the village of Germantown.
Thank you very much. And Matt, I wish you would not have spoken about dog excrement. And I hope the president of my homeowners association is now watching, because when we first moved in almost 20 years ago, if we had a burnt out light bulb in our light pole, they'd put a lien on our house.
Yep.
We've somewhat matured since then. So. But great presentation. Do appreciate that. Commissioners, any questions? Richard.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Bridget.
It's good to see you again. I feel like every time I go to the market, you're there, and that's great. Obviously, eating and enjoying the spaces that you created. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit, us being the Plan Commission and those watching and those in the audience, how the developers agreement came forward. So we get a lot of questions and a lot of just general feedback that when a developer comes forward, they get everything that they're asking for, and that
Wish they had.
could you walk us through
Some of the community that's at, will be there.
could you walk us through how many iterations you had and some of the things that were discussed in those developers agreements, and really how Spur 16 came about?
Yeah, well, you were there, weren't you? You were in those meetings.
I was, so I kind of have an idea of what.
Smiling at each other, but again, it's got to be collaborative. I mean, it's got to be good for the community and it's got to work for the developer. No one is going to invest. A development of this size, of this magnitude in this community is probably upwards of $50 million. So no one is going to spend $50 million if it's not feasible, if it doesn't work. And I know that there's this concept that, these developers make all this money, but the risk that goes into it to put a development like this together is huge. I mean, it's huge. But it's also huge for the community because you've bought this land and you have an investment as well. So it has to work for both parties. You might go through, I think 8 versions was what we did in Mequon. How many, what's your?
In Oconomowoc, I think we were 6. Yeah, 6 different versions.
Yeah. It's not fun, but in the end, when you have a successful project like the Oconomowoc project, like the Mequon project, everybody's really happy at the end. Right? I mean, it's good.
It's sometimes a little rocky getting to that point, but
Fun, but
and then can you speak a little bit to, you alluded to it, that the village, well, the city in that case, purchased the property and then sold it to you for $1. Could you walk through how that was worked into your development agreement? Just a little bit more about the funding part of the agreement.
So yeah, the city sold it to me for $1. We put together the developments, 156 apartments and 20,000 square feet of commercial space, roughly a $50 million development. We raised $7 million in equity from a lot of local investors, people that lived in the community that wanted to be part of the development. And then the way the city got paid back was from our tax revenue. So our taxes are roughly, just for simple math, $500,000 a year. We've been in business for 5 years. We completed ahead of schedule and started generating taxes sooner than we had anticipated. We didn't get any break for doing that, but we did it. So the land has already been paid off. And the TIF is closed, and they've made an extensive amount of money at the town center. You guys probably know better than I do the numbers involved, but.
Bob? So what could Germantown do to make this village center site more attractive to developers? I mean, we're considering a TID. I mean, what really sold it for Mequon for you, and would that apply to Germantown's site?
Yeah, I mean, I think nowadays it's very difficult to make these deals work. Interest rates are high, costs are high. You want quality developments. So again, it's got to be collaborative. Either it's a discount on the land or it's a help with the infrastructure costs. You want to add to that?
Yeah, so I was at a conference or I wasn't at the conference. I was talking to Ehlers, who's a financial consultant. I was at a meeting with them, just in a trade organization. And basically, at most apartment complexes now, he said he was even shocked at the numbers, like 75% need some sort of financial assistance. And honestly, I don't know how you could do a redevelopment project without some sort of TIF kind of incentive base to be able to do it. I think the other thing, as I talked about the market, right? On the commercial end, realistic, expectations about what can happen there from a commercial perspective. And I think you're going to hear a little bit later from Newmark about, some of the data now, because a lot of businesses, really are taking a look at, cell phone data, and making business decisions. You got to meet certain criteria to be able to do that. And I think communities that have kind of a realistic, hey, what can we do to, create the rooftops? Because the earlier speakers, I thought, hit the point really, really well. Rooftops are important to these businesses, and to have them in walkable distance is very, very important to them. And then add bicycle, just the ease to get there is very, very important. So traffic design is going to be important, all sorts of different things. And that's where the community can create some flexibility as well. Taking a look at their standard ordinances and putting PUDs in place or something to create some greater flexibility to create the type of environment that's going to be both attractive to the residents, work from a traffic flow standpoint for the commercial aspects of it, and try to create those win-win-wins and try to line up, kind of all the goals of all the different parties and try to hit as many of them as you can.
You do a simple analysis too. I mean, there's key issues like trash, traffic, parking, and you put everything together, you work together to come up with a plan, and then you do what's called a gap analysis. So it's all open book. You see exactly what everything costs. And then if there's a gap, that's how you make up the difference in order to make the development work.
Matt and City, I'm the new village president. When I was running, I fought against the Village Center project. And a couple reasons why: high density and also using a TID. But now I'm the village president. I got a fiduciary responsibility to do what's right for the financial posture of the community here, and I will do that. But outside of a TID, I think, Bridget, you mentioned selling the land for $1. We've got millions of dollars invested in Village Center. If we would sell it for $1, would that entice a developer to come in to move dirt, build, and then we would get the tax revenue year over year? I like that concept. What are your thoughts?
You want to go first? I'll let you answer first.
Go ahead. I want to hear.
It really depends. I think that would be an important first step. It really depends on what the performa says and what you actually design, if that will actually cover what is needed to fill the gap, right? I don't know if just getting the land for $1 would cover the gap. I'm skeptical.
It just depends how many units, right?
Right. It depends on the number of units, depends on.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask a follow-up. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the relationship between the density of the development and the amount of support that a developer might need.
Well, I think the more dense it is, there's economies of scale that emerge that drive down our construction costs per unit as well. And you take a look at the value that's then being created. And so it would probably reduce the amount. I know it would reduce the amount of the request, but without having specific proposals and all sorts of stuff, we're talking theory, but yeah, higher density should require a less of a need.
Thank you. Questions? Further questions? Village trustees, any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot. Appreciate that. I'm sorry. Oh, Russ?
Oh, yeah, I thought.
Not yet,
so.
not yet. Sorry.
And kind of piggyback off of President Soderberg's comments regarding the TIF scenario. So fully understand, right? They gave you the land for $1. That makes up in perpetuity year over year off that taxing revenue, right? Helps displace other residents' responsibilities to the tax rolls, right? Helps us provide services, all of that. How do we do that and not push it for 27 years? in a TID?
So once again, it depends on the density and all that. So our Oconomowoc, they created a TIF proposal, and it was very important for the mayor that he did not want to go the full 27 years. He wanted to go 15. And we worked really, really hard to try to meet that as a goal. We got there barely, but there was a lot of give and take to be able to do that, where there had to be some flexibility in the infrastructure requirements that they were requiring on us, some flexibility on parking, in order to be able to get there. So it really truly is just sitting down and figuring out what people's goals are and how do we make this thing happen. The advantage of providing the land up front to the developer is that's a cost upfront that doesn't have to then be paid for and then borrowed money on and carry the interest costs. So there is a considerable savings there for the developer that should portray in the length of any additional TIF request.
Well, I can dive into some of the give and take there for me to help whittle that down from 27 whatever years to 15 years to 10 years to 5 years. What does that look like? We're talking, to your point, scale, size.
Yeah, scale and size, and I think from our standpoint, there was a lot of discussions about design guides, materials used on buildings, architectural look, kind of a lot of kind of discussion, give and take about where current costs are as we go forward. So I mean, it's 6 development agreements, 8 development agreements. It's a lot of back and forth trying to figure out, hey, how do we try to meet this goal, or how close can we get to meeting the goal? I honestly didn't think, I thought we'd end up at like 17. I didn't think we could get to 15, but we had a major opportunity come forward like right away that was interested in repurposing one of the buildings that we were planning on demolishing it. So this is where you listen to the marketplace. And we went to the community and said, hey, we have an opportunity to get this.
The Sundix came on?
Yep, the Sundix came along, and we were going to demolish that building. And it, right there, I could cut off 2 years, off the pro forma by not having the cost to demolish that building and then carry that.
There's ways to work around not having it be a full run, TID-wise.
TID-wise, it depends on the project, depends on what you want, depends on the density. There's no, I wish that I could say there's one set answer, but these projects are so complex that you're juggling multiple different things.
I think what I'm trying to get the point across is if it is a TID, it doesn't have to be 27.
It doesn't have to be 27 years. Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Jeff?
Thank you. Our last speaker this evening, Kevin Schmoll, Managing Director with Newmark. He's going to share his perspective with us on what makes a successful mixed-use development. And I have the feeling, based on some of the slides, we're going to be getting into some weeds today.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks for having me. I enjoy kind of getting into the nerdy aspects of commercial real estate. Much of what I've been doing for the past 17 years as a retail broker has evolved into being even more data-driven than it once was. Some of my predecessors built their careers on really just having boots on the ground knowledge, which I'm proud to develop myself as well. But their task in the past 20 years ago was to socialize with merchants and restaurant owners to really get a sense for business performance, which is an art form in itself. And today we're blessed to have data to help support decision-making by retailers. So just by brief way of introduction, been a broker for 17 years. I've probably completed roughly 600 commercial leases and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of commercial investment sales. I'm also an owner of some shopping centers, some strip malls, some restaurants, industrial buildings, et cetera. So I kind of come to this conversation from a multiple disciplinary standpoint, as having been on all sides of that table. So one thing we like to talk about is commercial occupiers and really what is retail today. It was evolving, prior to the pandemic, and like many other trends, has accelerated. When I first started in the leasing world, much of our work was being done with restaurants, boutiques, soft goods merchants, etc. And it's really transitioned over the past few years. One of the sound bites you'll hear in the retail world is, or the strip mall world specifically, is medtail. And that relates to medical occupiers who are preferring to occupy storefronts. kind of as evidence of an acceleration by COVID, many of these business owners, many oftentimes independent clinics, found themselves in medical office buildings where their businesses were constrained by some of the occupancy standards of the time, and preferred to have direct entrance from a parking lot, preferred to have fewer rules and expectations, preferred to have better branding for themselves as being independent healthcare providers. So a lot of what we're doing today, I would estimate 40 to 45% of our leasing in the strip mall and storefront space is to medical occupiers such as dentist, orthodontist, vision, various types of salon, spas, etc. So really, when we think about retail, we like to almost get away from the moniker of retail and talk more about storefronts and more about commercial occupancy as being a much wider spectrum. There was a lot of discussion over the years about the Amazon effect as killing retail. I would estimate about 10 years ago, it was the undertone in the Wall Street Journal and other publications of the death of retail, the apocalypse of retail, et cetera. And it's really been anything but in more recent years. We saw a surge in occupancy for more experiential concepts like public markets, as Cindy was discussing, concepts surrounding, say, like the Fiserv Forum, fitness being another. But then more recently, it's been a lot more about last mile and irreplaceable services. A real estate investor once made a kind of a concise point in saying you can't get your hair cut by Amazon, and as being a category that's still very viable in our storefronts. And we're looking at these strip malls and commercial occupancies as really servicing the residents within a 5-minute drive time or within a couple of miles of the site. Another trend accelerated through COVID is the work from home mentality, where, for instance, I own a restaurant, building as a landlord, and observing the sales of my tenant. Prior to COVID, most of their sales were coming nights and weekends. I'll just say it's the Bay Restaurant in Whitefish Bay. And in observing their trends now, just anecdotally by observation and through attendance, I patronize my tenants. Their lunchtime activity is much stronger than it ever was. And in asking some of the patrons, it's often because they're working from home and they're stepping out for a meeting or want to get away from the kitchen table or their home office and to get out into the community. So they're coming out for lunch. They're still coming out for dinner. Business is good, but it's really shifted some of the day parts. So just a few of the observations for sort of our occupancy on the commercial side. Like I started the conversation, decision-making for these retailers has really become much more sophisticated. In the past, a commercial occupier might rely on its broker or its real estate department to, through credit card data or observation and experience in the marketplace to make decisions on where they should locate. I will disagree with one comment that Pete had today about, some types of commercial not wanting to be near their competition. I would say that more often than not, competition, drives competitive demand. It's kind of the age-old story of McDonald's wanting to co-locate with Burger King and vice versa. Usually one entrant comes into the market, CVS and Walgreens being another. One proves the market and the other notices and then follows suit. And you can see that even more so today in the data. Traffic counts were mentioned, and that's true. Traffic counts are critical. As we were talking about this site, the combined traffic counts at the nearest intersection are approximately 26,000. It's a little bit lower than we'd like to see. Blue Mound has been mentioned. One of the highest traffic intersections in the state is Capitol and 124th and Capitol and Brookfield, carrying almost 70,000 cars per day. And this certainly isn't that, shouldn't be that, won't be that. But there's enough traffic to sustain an appropriate amount of retail. When we start looking at submarkets and trying to make pass-fail decisions before we start looking at individual sites, we tend to look at some high-level observations. We tend to look at who's in that market, how they're doing compared to their peer set. And so, for instance, some local observations here in Germantown, your Pick and Save has annual sales of 29 million. There was a headline I was reading earlier today where Roundy's, Kroger are closing 5 Milwaukee area locations. Those do not include Germantown. You're in the, basically the top 25% of stores for your Pick and Save here, which is great. It's a little bit of a laggard performer for Sendix, but Sendix, for having so few locations, it's still an outstanding store. as it relates to their national averages on a price per square foot basis. And these are things that retailers look for when looking at communities and making a pass-fail decision on whether to focus and, try to identify sites in this community before focusing on specific areas. One of the tools that we use for doing that, I forget which speaker referenced it, but whenever you've subscribed to an app and none of us read the fine print, one of the things you're giving away is some of your privacy. And a company such as Placer AI, which is the platform that I use, aggregates the data from our cell phones and helps to predict and analyze consumer trends. So I thought I would share just a few things with you to help you better understand, kind of the current market and how a retailer looks at the world. This is the data for your Pick and Save. So I already spoke to sort of its annual numbers, but this is a heat map basically showing where the customer set is coming from. It's not novel or, it's not surprising in any way. It's, serving a community need, but it's giving you a sense for where customers are coming from to visit your Pick and Save. And, similarly as well for Sendix. If you spend some time with the tool as I do, you can get into some travel data in terms of where they're coming from, where they're going to, how long they're staying, how many customers are leaving Pick and Save to go to Sendix and vice versa. And certainly we can do this for any brand, and the data continues to get better. I thought it would be kind of fun to compare one of my favorites, which is Roberts, to kind of the corporate giant being McDonald's. And the data came back, pretty similar. I was happy to see what Roberts was doing in terms of competing with McDonald's. But this is something we do on a day-to-day basis in terms of, again, evaluating how a current brand is doing and trying to extrapolate that data into a prediction for how another occupier might perform in the market. One thing we like to talk about, oftentimes I'll get calls from community leaders or developers who say, like, isn't this a great site? This is Germantown. We don't have this. Isn't it a great site? And oftentimes the answer is yes. But I like to remind people of the perspective of just because it's a good market doesn't mean it's a best market. Oftentimes I'll have clients who have a wanting to open, say, 20 to 30 locations throughout the state. And, we simply prioritize markets. And just because you have a site that checks most of the boxes and might be the best site in Germantown, doesn't mean it's the best site for the entire state. And that's, kind of a tough thing, tough feedback to offer a developer or community leader to compare it to another. And we'd like to obviously open as many and as quickly as we can. But the prioritization by these retailers that's driven by this data is a very real thing. They're not going to invest in one community just because it's available and because it's easy when the data is suggesting that they might do twice as much sales in another market. One thing I was trying to do and trying to wrap my mind around from a data standpoint was to compare Germantown in this intersection to kind of the peer set being Mequon and Menominee Falls. Another tool that we use is called SiteWise. And what SiteWise does is SiteWise, as a company that you subscribe to, buys essentially credit card information from all of the majors and helps to aggregate it. So when I select an intersection, I can choose the radius. In this case, we used 1/2 mile. And I can determine very accurately the amount of sales within 1/2 mile. And that's another thing that retailers are looking for, because they're looking at trying to measure discretionary income and consumer habits. And so when I compared this intersection to Mequon Road and Pilgrim Road, this intersection to County Line Road and Appleton Avenue in Menominee Falls, and the same of Mequon Road and Port Washington Road in Mequon, it's just interesting to see them side by side. I would say that in the scope of southeastern Wisconsin, these are all exceptional. So even though of the three, Germantown is sort of a laggard, it's still far and away better in terms of its spending and some of its incomes than some of the other markets in southeastern Wisconsin. But I think it's interesting, as it's been mentioned tonight, in comparing to projects in these markets, just to take a step back and to consider how a retailer or a business owner might make a decision on whether to locate in Germantown or anywhere else. For the same reason, and seeing that Cindy was on the docket tonight as well, I prepared this slide as well because I thought maybe it'd be a little bit more analogous to compare Mequon Road and Pilgrim Road to Mequon Road and Cedarburg Road closer to her projects, just because I admire some of the work that's been done there and the impact it's had on the community. And I think it's interesting, especially as you look at the sales, primarily driven by having a Pick and Save and a Sendix, versus, in that area, predominantly the grocer being Piggly Wiggly. So from a, if you're looking at this from the standpoint of a real estate manager or a business owner, the indication you would get from a high level here is that, Mequon and Pilgrim Road might be a place to focus on, being that, there's a high degree of success in the analogous markets, and in many ways, this intersection is superior. With the exception of, some of the traffic and other elements in Menominee Falls and areas further south. So one thing, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to go last. And I should mention that I like planning commission meetings more than most sporting events. It's kind of my nerdy pleasure. I find myself at a meeting at least once a month, and it's nice. It's actually a pleasure not to have an agenda item. Usually I'm up here trying to get something passed. So it's nice tonight just to be kind of called upon for some perspective. So as being the last person, I thought it was interesting. I won't belabor this point, but I do, disagree with Pete's point about kind of being built, over retailed. And I would, walk back, or I would, counter his comments about Blue Mound Road. If you were to remove, Brookfield Square Mall from the data set, the 20% vacancy rate on Blue Mound Road, is probably sub 5. The mall representing most of the vacancy on Blue Mound Road. And I think that's very evident here in Germantown as well. If you took out some what I would refer to as more like resi-mercial or less sophisticated commercial spaces, your occupancy in Germantown is very strong for the most part. I do agree with him that you would want to be careful to avoid oversaturation to create like a musical chairs. You don't want some occupiers to chase the bright, shiny object of a new project and leave another existing landlord sort of in a lurch for having a vacancy. I will note, however, that given what we've talked about with construction costs and other things, the retail vacancy rate in southeastern Wisconsin is around 4%, very consistent with the national average. One of the pressures that we face as a retail occupier really looks at what they can afford to pay in rent as a derivative of their sales. So as we've looked at construction costs increasing by 30, 40, 50% over the past few years, it's really quite unsustainable for a developer to build more strip malls. Which has been good for me as an investor because I typically don't have vacancy in my portfolio. As a broker, I would mention that it's caused a bit of a challenge because I don't have quite as much work to do. Typically, when we are getting a space back from a tenant who is either closing for business or relocating, these spaces are usually leased before we even have time to hire a broker or put a sign in the window. So I would say that, if there were some musical chairs, that might be a situation where an occupier who's in an older building maybe moves up or graduates to a new space, in lieu of a renovation in place, and creates an opportunity for someone who, might be a good fit for that center. So it's a careful balance. One thing I would mention is I was trying to think as that comment was made, Cindy, I don't think there are many businesses at the Mequon Town Center that were relocations within Mequon. I think most were new businesses, which is admirable. So I think there's something to be careful with, and I think it primarily has to do with scale and trying to really analyze the market demand to not overbuild and to avoid causing any stagnant vacancies, be it in the new project or as recycled from another. It's interesting in that some of the work I did early in my career as a broker was retail space at the foot of commercial on the east side of Milwaukee and elsewhere throughout the city. And I think some people who aren't in our business assume that commercial space is a driver for the pro forma and that it's a benefit. And it might have been at one point, but especially now with what you're seeing for the lease rates that have been discussed for commercial space, for the residential space, consider that when I talk about market lease rates in Germantown as being $16 to $22 per square foot, the triple net is sort of an industry vernacular that means that the occupiers are reimbursing the landlord for the real estate taxes and common area maintenance, et cetera. But that 16 to 22 is really the critical piece. Consider the fact that most of the at the time, I would say 10 years ago, the average rental rate in the city or in southeastern Wisconsin on a per square foot basis for residential, it's measured really, you'll hear it spoken more about on a monthly basis, a per square foot monthly basis, And I remember when the market started to turn and residential units started renting for, $2 a square foot. That was sort of a big day for Milwaukee because it was always $1.50, $1.75. And all of a sudden units started renting at $2. People called it unsustainable. And today, we're, as much as, 4, and in some of the luxury properties downtown far greater, but, $3 to $4 per square foot per month is a very common rate for residential properties compared to how we quote rent for retail spaces being on an annual basis. So, a $22 equivalent triple net lease, is to say that the same square footage, the same footprint on the floors above might be renting for $36 per square foot. That's gross because the tenants are reimbursing for the expenses, but suffice it to say that retail has really kind of become a loss leader for developers. Oftentimes developers are building retail at the request of a municipality. And it is accretive to the project. People want to live in cool places. People want to walk to their coffee shop. But it's also a misnomer, in my opinion, that the density created by a project like this project is enough to sustain, the coffee shop or the restaurant or something in it. Those sales are accretive. My clients, my tenant clients typically look at those sales as sort of the cream on top. That helps their business, but they're really relying on the entire community. They can't rely on, 200, 300, 400 units, as part of the project to sustain their entire business. So, I think obviously I'm a retail advocate. I own retail. I'd like to buy more retail, but it's tough to build for retail. And so I think that's, it's something to be careful with and something to really examine as you work through any potential development agreements, that the developer also has an appropriate pro forma for leasing in terms of their lease rate expectations, but also the contributions they're making to those retail spaces to help with their build outs. Kind of to that end, a few projects that come to mind. Mequon Town Center. I think I got the square footages right. I was moving pretty quickly in estimating, but Mequon Town Center I think was right sized for that specific market, at being close to 30,000 square feet. I did some of the initial leasing, and I've observed very little turnover since then with 30,000 square feet. Mill Square in Grafton, where the Colectivo is located. It's a good and interesting project. The access is a little tough, 16,000 square feet, but there too, a few turnovers, but nothing dramatic. And I wouldn't say there's really been any strife during since its inception in terms of persistent vacancies. And then, of the three, 1505 is sort of a favorite of mine as well. I thought it was really right sized for the space. And I kind of bring that one up as well. One thing I was considering are the types of tenant mixes and who belongs, in a potential project in Germantown. And kind of going back to where we spoke earlier about occupancy types, it would be great to see a restaurant of sorts, its scale and its size sort of to be determined. Just in terms of its daily activation and the traffic it would bring on a daily and weekly basis. But I predict that you're also going to have demand from less traditional uses, as to say like a financial services, an Edward Jones, a lender, a bank, medical tenants like we've spoken about, et cetera. So I think it's going to, the commercial tenant mix has the potential to really represent the dichotomy of the current demand that we're seeing as being other than retail and other types of admirable occupancies. So I guess my takeaways were, the appropriate supply is making sure not to flood the market. I don't think you're at risk of that given the current occupancy rates here in Germantown. I think awareness is an interesting thing. One thing I was looking at, and I have access to Placer AI and AI on my phone as well. There were some comments about Germantown just not having enough awareness. And one thing you'll see, if you'll agree with this, Cindy, based on your observations or having been there pretty often, but my quick search is that Mequon's median age is 46.7 years old. The median age, according to Placer, you can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. The median age, according to Placer, is 38.7 at Mequon Town at Mequon Public Market. Do you think that's accurate? And it was also suggesting that you have 165,000 total visits in a year. Several of those visitors are coming frequently, so it's suggesting 70,000 unique visitors and 165,000 annual visitors. But I think it's interesting. So when we got married, my wife and I lived in Shorewood, and Mequon really wasn't on our list. Our perception of Mequon is that it was older and really wasn't for us. And now we live on Bayside, we're on the edge of Mequon, but there's very little commercial in Bayside, so we either spend our time and money in Mequon or in Whitefish Bay. But, not to, give you too much, credit, but I think it's deserved in that, the number of headlines about Mequon over the past 10 years, half of them have probably been about projects around the Mequon Town Center. I think it's much more of a household name now than it once was. And there's young people going there, obviously confirmed by the data, but then also anecdotally as well. And so in terms of getting more people talking about Germantown and getting people more aware and, coming here to visit, maybe falling in love with it and buying homes and putting their children in the school system, I just think it's an interesting opportunity. I think, notes, Pat also mentioned, do they know about Germantown? And that's where I think, the critical mass that's created by appropriate amount of retail, and we don't want occupiers per se. When we're looking at strip malls, as much as my lender would like if I leased to 8 different medical occupiers because their rate of attrition is very low, we're very careful as developers and as owners to really be careful with the tenant mix, because while I want the security in those medical tenants who rarely fail, I also want to choose a couple of restaurant tenants who drive the traffic and make people more aware of the project. And I think that's where, with some critical mass, with the appropriate amount of retail, helps to better tell the story you might be trying to tell for Germantown. I guess the last point that I would make too, because I think it's adjacent to retail, is we talk about the affordability and the ability to live in Germantown. And, tonight I've heard about your schools. Tonight we've been talking about the employment. Tonight there's been a little bit of discussion about types of retail you might want to see. But workers in those specific categories also need a place to live, and that's also a key consideration that we often hear from our tenant clients is, they'll secret shop. They'll go into businesses as we're driving markets to try to find out where the people are coming from who are actually working in those stores. And so access to quality, employment workers is critical. And I think, that's sort of dovetails into the multifamily. One thing that we've seen is when luxury multifamily gets built, it creates some opportunities in the older and Class B product, which again is oftentimes where these people who are younger in their careers and younger in their lives are able to live and to, work closer to where they sleep at night. So with that, any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Again, I'm learning a lot tonight, and I come from a retail background as well, so it's kind of refreshing hearing your comments. And you mentioned that Amazon is not cutting hair now. Just wait, they'll probably start cutting hair soon.
The Flowbee,
Yeah,
Flowbee's
they will.
coming back.
So,
Yeah.
commissioners, any questions? Bob?
Thank you for being here, Kevin. I'm very impressed with your background and knowledge. One item that you mentioned was that the amount of dwelling units under consideration at the village center would not be enough to sustain the retail part of it. Is that correct? I mean, we couldn't put enough dwelling units, nor would we want to, just to support the retail. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that kind of echoes some other comments. I think Pete made the comment about how, retail follows residential and not vice versa.
But is there a calculus though that to try to because that's a lightning rod in the community, this high density in this location. And would part of the calculus be that, well, we can reduce the density if there's an assumption that other existing dwelling units would sustain or support the retail? Is that part of the equation or the math on it?
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting take. Yeah, I stand behind the comment that the 400 dwelling units won't be enough to support the coffee shop, won't be enough to support the restaurant. I think the difference is if you want there to be a community center, if you want there, and maybe you don't, but if you want there to be some placemaking with a restaurant or a coffee shop, because of where we are in this economic cycle from the cost of construction, the only way to get it is to couple it with some multifamily. As we've discussed, and this is my opinion based on just the economics of prevailing market rental rates, based on what businesses have for gross sales and what they can afford to pay for rent and to stay in business. if you want the critical mass, I don't know that you can do it without coupling it with a mixed-use project, because it's really a loss leader as part of that project.
Mixed-use projects off-site of the village center or as part of the village center?
In my mind, and I think most often as part of it, as part, either at the ground level or adjacent to or on its edge to provide, screening and activation.
All right, thank you.
Further questions, comments? Russ?
Just given the cycle that we're in economically, are we swimming upstream with this type of project?
Well, I only speak to the commercial side. I would say that you're not. I would say that we're, despite Pete's comments about Blue Mountain and other markets, I would say for the most part, we are underserved. Typically, when you start talking about occupancy rates as being something, greater than 95%, you start dealing with some inefficiencies. And most of that competitive data set in terms of its vacancies are either obsolete, they have some issues with capitalization with their owners, et cetera. I would say that in this moment in time, your market's probably slightly underserved from a retail standpoint, but it's a delicate balance.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments? Village trustees, any questions for our speaker? Okay, Kevin, great job.
Thank you.
Appreciate your help. Okay, I think we're going on to the next topic. I hope you all learned a lot tonight. I certainly did, not just from what we're discussing tonight on the Village Center, but also some other projects that we know are going to be coming down the pike relatively soon. I definitely learned a lot. So we're now on to item 4, citizen input public appearance. Please be advised per 19.842 that information and comment will be received from the public. It is the policy of this municipality that public input will be limited to 4-minute period per person with a time extension granted at the discretion of the chairperson. Would anybody like to come forward and speak tonight? And you can sit at the table, Good evening and welcome.
I'm not. Scott Heffley, W159 and 10514 Old Farm Road, Germantown. I thought this was excellent information. Thank you to the people that did put this together. Myself and others, a group of us, have been asking for information like this for a number of years. So I'm happy that it did come to fruition. And I took a bunch of notes. One of the things that was brought up maybe about a year ago or so was we were notified by either the county or part of the Tracy Cross report that one of the issues we have in Germantown is it costs about $50,000 or so more to do anything in Germantown as compared to anywhere else in Washington County, whether it be West Bend, Kewaskum, Town of Polk, or whatever. It just costs more to do it here, likely due to our location premium that we have because of our location. And that's something we got to keep in mind. Why is it harder to make affordability here? Because it costs more to develop in Germantown than any other part of Washington County. And from my perspective, I'm not comparing myself to the Falls. Okay, the Falls has some amenities we do not. They have a downtown that's established. They have the falls. They have other things that they've had in place, old buildings that have been preserved. We don't have any of those things. So we have to work with the hand that we're dealt. And I think we can do that. And I think this was I think that the angst in the community that I continually hear, and I'm one of those angst people potentially from time to time, is the fact that this is information that is finally being brought forth after all these development projects have been discussed, and the community's been finding out about it after they happen, and people are fed up with that, to be quite honest. And so the fact that we are bringing it forward and getting it out and open is a first start. Now, where do we go from here? Where we go from here is to do these neighborhood meetings that we've been asking for, to have town hall meetings where residents can come forth and have their input and workshops. And whatever the result of everything is, it becomes part of that 2050 plan. The 2050 plan is not done. It's a living document. We've been told that. It evolves. This is part of the evolution of that. And the final thing I'll say, I've lived here 32 years, okay? And I like it here and I'm staying here. I'm not moving till I have to, maybe to the Gables or something, but I'm staying here. Okay? But the struggle that I have, and not for people that maybe lived here 5 years or 10 years or 12 years or 7 years or whatever it is that I like it the way it is. Okay? We want to talk about the status quo. I like it the way it is. I do like it the way it is. So the angst is, are we looking to become something just to copy somebody else? Okay, imitation is the most serious form of flattery. I get that. But my uncles lived in Mequon for 45 years. And Mequon's great, but I don't want to become Mequon. Okay? I don't want to become Cedarburg. I grew up on the Cedarburg-Grafton border. My parents still live in the town of Grafton. I love Grafton. I love Cedarburg. I spent my whole childhood there, right? I go there all the time. I like the fact that I can go to Cedarburg and they're different than we are, and I come back to Germantown. And I can go to Mequon and I can do those things. You know what? There's a lot of things to do in this town. I was just talking to our executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. We have about 150 events just in Germantown that we put on as a community that is available to go do, you know? So to say we don't have anything is ridiculous. We do have a lot. The question that is on the table is, what do we want to be when we grow up, if that's a word? Now, we have 21,000 people. We are growing up. What is the next evolution? And I want to preserve what we have here and not ruin it by trying to copy somebody else. And that's my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak tonight? Good evening and welcome.
Sorry, it's taking so long. Oops. I don't know if you can, okay. Well, I enjoyed the comments tonight. I think they were very helpful, and I think it changed some of the direction that I feel our board should be going to also. What I'm hearing here, and I think we agree, most of the residents would agree with Pat Tasker from Shore West. Germantown has been the big issue with all the things presented to us within the last year or so. The issue is the taxpayers of Germantown have been overwhelmingly reluctant to the ideas, and they've rejected most of the ideas because we didn't have a plan, nothing to really work with. And everybody's got different ideas about business, and we've been very bitter because a lot of money, millions of dollars were spent on land I don't think we should have bought, but maybe they could sell Grossnick for $1 and do something with it. And the residents have said no to a lot of things that have come out of this board. And I think we need to slow down. I think this should have given us a good idea. I have been owned a rental. My husband and I own rental properties most of our married life. My father and mother did. I've owned a business for many, many years. And some of the areas mentioned, one of the realtors, I think, mentioned Wauwatosa near St. Bernard's. I lived right off of Nominee River Parkway. I had a beautiful home there. We lived there for 40 years. And as soon as it's starting to get built up, people were moving because they didn't like it. And I think what Germantown, our community wants is we want to save the characteristics of our community. We like it here. I couldn't stand Wauwatosa. I sold a beautiful home when my husband died, because I couldn't stand the commotion around the village. I live right off Menominee River Parkway. It was right by the park. It was a beautiful place. And yet when I moved out here, I thought, this is where I want to be more permanently, because I like the characteristics, the quietness of what this town represents. And I think that's what people are looking for. And I think we need to be very careful right now as a board about the economy, and it's a very questionable economy. I'm in the stock market slightly. Some of the stocks I sold, Walgreens scared me to death. Their stock went down so bad they're going to merge now. That's not good. There are things that are happening in the community and in our economy that I think before this whole night was excellent because I think it gave a good idea for what we need to do. That corner is got to be carefully thought out and planned along with the residents' comments. And we need to be very watchful. And Elm Grove, I have many wealthy friends that live there, and they can't stand the way it is now. They didn't like when the church sold out to all those apartments and they had all that commotion. They liked the quiet village, and a lot of them won't sell because they're older and they're not going to move. It's a lot to move a house you've been in most of your life. So I've had a lot of experience with people who own businesses and people where I've lived, and I've never had a renter. I owned side by side now, and when I had it for rent, many people came to rent, and I haven't had one person ask me how far it is to walk somewhere. Nobody's going to walk. Most of the people I know, they're all going to drive a car, but nobody ever asked me where the parks are either. They want to know how much, how many bedrooms, just like one realtor said, do you have a garage? Do you have a basement in that side? And that's what they ask, how much is your rent? And they want to see the lease. That's what they ask you. So I enjoyed this tonight, and I hope the board will have a different outlook to what we're going to do with our village. We want to save this village the way it is and yet have the characteristics that we're looking for and to fit everybody's ideal. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else have come forward and speak tonight? Good evening, welcome.
Takes me a little while. Fine. Give me my love this pen.
Well, don't lose it then. Hi, good morning. Okay, yeah. Doug Lohman, W180N9881 Rivers Bend Circle West, and man, do I got a lot of things here. I'll be quick though, I promise. I'm going to start off with Matt Maroney said, I think he summed it up when he said, clearly articulate goals. I think that's the most important thing. I do understand that the nature of government is that if you clearly articulate goals, that brings out all the detractors and you get a great big swamp of people that, are against those goals. And that's all you hear from. Sorry about that, but that's just the way government works, right? I'm going to be, I just wrote these down as bullet points, so I'm going to be all over the place. And the second thing I've got on here is forecasting is the art of driving using the rear view mirrors. And keep that in mind on everything that you hear about a forecast. I want to comment on, I really appreciated the real estate agents coming up here and sharing their thoughts. Pat Tasker, she brought up the new construction and the $630,000 and above costs on that. She did that at a couple of village board meetings ago also. And I got a little curious about it and looking at it a little bit differently than what she presented as. So I went home and I pulled up new construction on Zillow. Not the best way to do it, but just to get I was just looking for a general thing on it. And there were 3 properties came up as new construction. And yeah, lowest price one was 630,000. Highest price one was 800 and some thousand. I don't remember. The curious thing is the smallest lot was 0.34 acres, just over a third of an acre. The smallest house was 2,300 square feet. And I think it was Kevin Nash who said, we need starter homes, those, and I think Josh said something about 12 to 1,500 square foot homes. Smaller starter home is a starter home. Smaller lots, smaller house. There's difficulty, I realize there's difficulties in getting developers to build things like that because there's just not the same amount of money in it. Moving right along. I realize there's a lot of pressure to increase revenue. I started coming to these meetings when you were finishing up with the 2050 plan. And I was just getting my feet wet in these village board meetings, and but I was wondering all along on the 2050 plan, why we were spending so much time, putting so much effort into it when I knew that the nature of government is that, okay, we say this piece of property is going to be like this, but if somebody comes in and says, well, I want to use it this way, it's going to come in front of the board, and the board will say yay or nay. It can just change it, you know, and I never asked a question, but somebody finally did ask the question, and so I think it was President Walter at the time who said, well, yeah, we can change our minds. And after that, the 2050 plan magically got done, you know, which I was glad to see. But I want to fast forward to one of the things that was said during that was a comparison to Wauwatosa and West Allis was made. And the statement was made that Wauwatosa and West Allis were both fully developed. So I would like to fast forward Germantown being fully developed. Then there's not these means to raise revenue. And I've stated before at village boards meetings that my read of the people in this community is they want to stay a suburb. They do not want urban developments at all. You know, you start going 3 stories and higher, everybody starts thinking it's an urban type of thing. And we need to also develop the village infrastructure to grow, i.e., as the village grows, somehow or another that we can add on to it, instead of moving on to new, okay, we got to build new and do it in a new place. Think now, right now, about, okay, how can we do this so that we can grow in the future if need be? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for coming tonight. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Good evening and welcome.
Judy Rogers, W165N10611 Wagon Trail. I got a lot of nice information tonight, and I agree with Scott Heffley. A lot of our angst is because of things we didn't know. Okay, that temperature is coming down, but I still have questions with the village center. I understand buying the Flower Source property, but I don't understand why the clinic had to be bought. I don't understand why in this 2050 plan, you're talking about buying the properties on the corner, and that it even extends across the street to where Chase and Walgreens is. I just don't understand, and nobody's given me the answer to that. I know that this is supposed to be coming in right in different segments, but nobody's explained to me why that's happening or why it did happen. Also, in one of the very first meetings I attended in March, there was a presentation. It showed huge apartment buildings, and I understand it is cheaper to build up than to build out, but these are right on the road. They came right up to the road. And where it said a marketplace, I saw a little bit of area where there's some tables and there was maybe a chessboard, or maybe you could have an ice rink, but it's not like a market center where you're going to have events. So I'm still trying to understand this concept of the village center and what it's supposed to be. So That's all I have to say. I'm still looking for answers. So thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Anyone else like to come forward and speak? Anyone on WebEx would like to speak? Jeff?
Two letters that we received.
Yeah, please.
Did you want to read those?
No, you can read them. And after the last time, I had no problem reading the 250 comments from our citizens because that was the right thing to do. But staff is going to do this going forward. They do a much better job at it. So,
All right, thank you. The first one is from Jason Young, N112 West 20965 Mequon Road, a resident of Germantown, to the Plan Commission. Dear members of the Plan Commission, I'm writing as a concerned and invested resident of Germantown to express the growing need for thoughtful development in our community, particularly in the areas of housing, business expansion, and the integration of mixed-use development. I've been following this project closely, and even though I haven't been able to attend the meetings in person to voice my opinion, I feel obligated to do so at this point. I apologize that I'm not able to be there in person today. However, I want to make sure my strong support for this effort is clearly expressed. Our village has long aspired to be business-driven, and while that vision is admirable, it cannot be fully realized without a parallel effort to support population growth and demographic diversity. Businesses, especially those offering retail, dining, and services, depend on a strong, diverse population base. To attract and retain these commercial users, we must be willing to increase residential density in a way that is intentional and tastefully designed. High-density housing, whether apartments, condos, or mixed-use developments, can help generate the foot traffic and energy that successful retail environments need to thrive. I often hear from family, friends, and neighbors that they wish Germantown offered more options, places to eat, shop, and spend time without leaving the community. Right now, too many of us are traveling to surrounding areas to enjoy the kind of amenities we should have here. Without the creation of a true village center and the population base to support it, we risk remaining a sleepy community, and even worse, we risk losing residents who want more from where they live. It's worth noting that the last significant multifamily residential development in Germantown occurred in 2017, 8 years ago. Since then, progress has been minimal. This lack of diverse housing options limits who can live in our community, and it directly affects our economic potential. All types of housing are needed right now, from options for young professionals and families to downsized, maintenance-free homes for older adults who want to stay in Germantown. However, in the current market, high-density rental apartments are especially needed, and they can absolutely be tastefully done to attract people who want to call Germantown home. Not everyone wants to be a homeowner, take on the responsibilities of maintenance, has the financial ability to purchase a home. Yet many still deeply value the opportunity to live in Germantown and contribute to our community. Encouraging mixed-use development that integrates residential, commercial, office, and public spaces will not only bring modern vibrancy to our community, but also improve walkability, convenience, and livability. These types of developments help grow our tax base, which can reduce the financial burden on individual homeowners while supporting the services and infrastructure we all rely on. Germantown has a unique opportunity to grow wisely and with intention. I urge the Planning Commission to take actionable steps through updated zoning and long-term planning to support the kind of development that brings life, diversity, and sustainability to our village. We need to attract people in order to attract the businesses and experiences we all want. Thank you for your time and for your dedication to the future of Germantown. I'm hopeful we can move forward in a way that honors the character of our community while embracing the change that will help it thrive. Sincerely, Jason Young. And our second letter is from Sion Silverman, also a resident. As both the Germantown resident of 27 years and a local residential realtor for over 15 years, I have had the privilege of working with countless families and individuals who want to call Germantown home. Through my work in and around Germantown, I've heard a consistent message from both current residents and prospective buyers. Germantown lacks a vibrant central place where people can live, gather, and stay without having to go elsewhere. That's exactly why I believe it's time for Germantown to support and move forward with the Village Center project. Many of my clients, especially younger buyers, downsizing seniors, and working professionals, are looking for walkable, mixed-use spaces with access to restaurants, shops, and community amenities. Right now, they turn to surrounding communities like Menominee Falls, Cedarburg, or Mequon to find the lifestyle they want. We're missing the opportunity to keep that energy, investment, and sense of community right here in Germantown. Equally important is our need to diversify housing options. While Germantown has long been known for its beautiful single-family neighborhoods, not everyone is in a position to buy a home, nor does everyone want to. The inclusion of high-quality rental apartments in the Village Center project would fill a need for our community. People at all stages of life and income levels should have a chance to live here. We need housing that reflects the real needs of our community, whether that's for young professionals just starting out, families in transition, or older adults looking to downsize and stay local. It's also important to recognize that higher density is both appropriate and required for a town center like this to be successful. Density brings the foot traffic and customer base needed to support retail, dining, and other amenities that make these places vibrant and sustainable. Without enough residents living nearby, businesses will struggle, and the entire vision risks falling short. We need higher density housing in Germantown, and while it may not be appropriate in all areas of our village, the village center is definitely an area where it feels essential. This also seems to be the ideal place for a TID, so I was disappointed to see it put on pause. I hope it will move forward again, as it's needed for a big project like this, especially in today's development and financing environment. Whether or not this would be the first time Germantown includes residential within a TID, the reality is that residential is an essential part of mixed-use development. A TID that includes residential is not unusual. It's simply what's required to make a project of this scale viable in today's market. Beyond serving residents' needs, a project like this should bring significant financial benefits to the village. Mixed-use developments increase the local tax base, generating more property tax revenue per acre than traditional singles-use zoning. This added tax base can support public services, infrastructure, and schools without increasing the burden on existing residents. It seems to be a fiscally responsible investment in Germantown's future. As a resident who loves this community and wants to continue to live and work here, and as someone who talks to prospective buyers about what they're looking for regularly, I can confidently say that the Village Center project is not just wanted, it's needed. Unfortunately, I will be out of town for the next public meeting and comment period, but I want to provide my perspective and insights. Feel free to read into public record and contact me with any questions. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sion Silverman.
Thank you, and you did a much better job at that than I did, so you're hired. So, any further comments from the audience here tonight? Good evening and welcome.
Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. I just have a question, and that is, a couple of questions. What are the next steps? Are you going to, I think you should have open public conversation at, whether it's at the Plan Commission or wherever, to talk about how you're going to go about this, not jump to the how or the what for the design, but how the process is going to work from here. As I've discussed ad nauseum over these years, the 2050 plan is incomplete because the master planning was never done for some of these areas within the village. And so I think a serious conversation and some steps about how that's going to happen, along with whatever is going on with the Economic Development Commission, needs to be had in a general way. I think that will put a lot, that will do a lot to dispel some of the problems and the issues that have been, that have occurred previously, where a lot of the decisions appeared to be made in secret about development, and we need to get away from that. So public meetings to discuss this process, whether it's another special Plan Commission meeting. Thank you for having having a special Plan Commission meeting, and thank you to all the speakers who came, because it was fabulous information. We need time to absorb it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience like to come forward? Anyone else or anyone on WebEx would like to speak tonight? Okay, we're done with public comments. before we leave, I just want to thank our village administrator for putting together a wonderful agenda with some great speakers, and thank you to the speakers. I do apologize, it's a little after 10 o'clock, but I hope you learned as much as I learned in terms of not only what we could do for Village Center, but also for the other projects that we know are coming down the pike in the village of Germantown. Before you leave, there's a whole bunch of munchies over there. Please take some with you. As a parting gift, yes. And we are at 10:02, and I'm going to close this meeting. Thank you all for coming, and please drive home safe.